Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Titusville City Council meeting of June 12, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. We have a quorum. I'll call this meeting to order. Is there a pastor in the audience that would like to say the invocation? I see no one. Please join me in a moment of silence. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business is approval of minutes on April 24th, 2018.
I'd move to approve the minutes of the regular city council meeting on April 24th, 2018.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Anybody opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Special recognitions and presentations, we have none. Boards and commissions.
Yes, sir. Item 6A is to accept the Titusville Environmental Commission semi-annual report, and there is no presentation, so this will be as written.
All right. I have a motion to that effect.
I'd move. Okay, second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
And the opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Next one, sir, item B.
Yes, sir. Item 6B, regular Titusville Environmental Commission member Robert Shavir submitted his resignation from the TEC effective May 10, 2018. Per Land Development Regulations, Section 31-122, at least one of the members of the Titusville Environmental Commission shall currently be a member of the Planning and Zoning Board. Until his recent resignation, Mr. Shavir served this dual capacity role and desires to continue to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Staff will continue to seek a member to serve in this dual capacity role. And the recommendation is to accept the resignation of regular member Robert Shavir from the Titusville Environmental Commission with a term that was scheduled to expire on November 30th, 2018.
All right, and we will pursue somebody to fill that other position. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
All right, I have a motion to accept Mr. Shavir's resignation from the TEC with regrets.
I make that motion to accept the resignation of member. I make the motion to accept the regular member Robert Shavir's resignation from the TEC.
Second.
Member Stokely, you got that one clearly. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Item 6C.
Item 6C, alternate Historic Preservation Board member Jeffrey Upton has submitted his resignation effective June 5th, 2018. His term expires on October 31st, 2019. Currently, there are no other applications on file for council's consideration.
I will accept the motion to accept alternate member Jeffrey Upton's resignation with regrets.
So moved.
Have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Any opposed, like sign. I hear none. Passes unanimously. Petitions and requests from the public. President Clerk, would you please read the rules?
Yes, sir. The following is the procedure for public comment. Individuals wishing to speak on public and non-public hearing agenda items must complete a sign-up card and present it to the clerk prior to the item being introduced. Those wishing to speak on quasi-judicial public hearings must complete a sign-up card and sign the oath. Individuals wishing to speak on non-agenda items may do so under petitions and requests from the public present. This opportunity is offered twice in the meeting, and individuals may speak at either the first or second petitions and requests, but not both. No sign-up card is required. Sign-up and oath cards are located on the table in the back of the council chamber. Citizens shall not comment on any issue more than once during the meeting. All comments except petitions and requests must address the pending issue, and citizens will be given 3 minutes to speak on all agenda items.
Would anybody like to come up and speak under petitions and requests at this time? Sir?
Good evening. My name is Stan Johnston, and I'm handing out a email that I sent you on June the 7th. Tonight I give you this hard copy so that you may question or comment to me. The first sentence of this email says, I first request that if you find any errors in this correspondence, including attachment, that you contact me in writing of these errors. A few sentences down, I wrote, says, please be advised that the bulk of this stack of correspondence, and in this case, I'm talking about when Walt Johnson shows you this stack of correspondence that I've done in the last few years. That's what this email is related to, and therefore you can eliminate most of my big stack of correspondence by answering these 6 simple questions that I have proposed to you. So let's skip now to page 4. Page 4 is shows two flood zone maps. This is Baker's subdivision. Baker's subdivision has streets Carroll, Linda, Morbecca, Sherry, and Beatrice. And you'll see in the first map, 1989, is that the flood zone elevation is elevation 20 feet. Then in 2016, it was lowered by a LOMAR to elevation 18.9. This removed 49 of the 59 homes. Over 80% of the homes were removed. So I have 2 questions for you in this one. Is that question number 1 is during the FEMA map review process, 1989 map firm, FEMA requested the city and public any information that disputes the FEMA map. Well, and then the question to you, question number 1 is, why did city choose to not notify FEMA or me and others of any of these above 4 sources? The sources are up there by DRMP, Mr. Lemke, PBS&J, and Robert Moon. Sources of prior to the deadline to notify FEMA, and then not until March 17, 2014 was it notified to FEMA. Now, question number 2 is just in the bold. I'll just read the bold to you. It says, how or where did city or FEMA obtain the incorrect elevation? That's the elevation 20 feet for the numbered 100-year flood zone that is on the 1989 format. Now let's go to the last page. The last page is this one. That's 2 more flood maps. This is different subdivisions. This is Parkland Estates and Moneymead Estates. And the first 2 questions are very similar to the ones I asked you about Baker's subdivision. And in this case, they have a similar situation. The first 2 questions are very similar to the first 2 questions that I asked you on Baker's subdivision to respond to. Question 4 is different. It says, question 4, I'll read it to you. It says, why has City Council refused the petition signed by homeowners of Parkland and Bonniemead Estates subdivision to have a LOMAR prepared to correct any errors in the 100-year flood zone elevation? Well, in this particular comparison you're seeing is that we got now, it has changed, it increased, and we've got 57 homes in the flood zone. So this is your opportunity to answer questions and eliminate most of this big stack of objectionable paperwork that you have. So any questions, comments, or suggestions, I'm here to respond to. Thank you.
I see no lights. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Next card, please.
Sir, Mr. Cliff Aiken.
Good evening, Councilman. Cliff Aiken with Excel Project Management. We're the owners of Titus Landing. And we're here to start the process by doing an amendment to our development agreement and also doing an adjustment to our zoning code.
One
A couple
second,
years
sir.
ago, yeah.
If you will. Is this item on tonight?
This is petitions and requests, sir.
No, I mean, it's not on, it's not already on?
No,
Okay.
sir.
Go ahead, sir. I
No.
just want to make sure.
So this is just to get council to advise
Right
staff
place to do it,
to
right?
proceed
Just
with the process. So a couple years ago, you probably remember that we have a building height limitation of 50 feet in our zoning code. And we came back to modify that code to be consistent with the state of Florida's code, which basically allows roof structures to be in excess of 50 feet for things like towers, spires, steeples, and other roof structures. And I have to read that because I forget exactly what it says most of the time. So anyway, if you remember, we made those adjustments to allow us to build the parish building, which has the cone in the front, which is in excess of 50 feet. It actually goes to 70 feet or thereabouts. So we thought we had adjusted the code to allow ourselves to do that. It was consistent with what we did for Epic. And we're in our third phase now doing the Harley-Davidson building, which also has a tower associated with that building, but also at the request of the tenant has a flagpole that will be in excess of the 50 feet. And we've been advised by staff that in order to allow us to put the flagpole there, because it's not a tower, spire, steeple, or roof structure, we need to come back and do an adjustment to our development agreement and also change the zoning code to allow this to happen. So it's very simple. It's one flagpole that we're putting on that building, and we would like the ability to work with staff to get that stuff taken care of over the next couple of months. So that's why we're here.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions? Go
I'm
right
not
ahead.
sure this is a question. I did have the similar questions as you had, but I don't particularly have a problem with what he's asking.
All right, would you like to make a motion?
Actually, I think probably a direction to staff to make whatever changes are appropriate.
Oh, we'll vote on it, yes.
Okay.
It's a motion. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Next card, please.
Sir, only that individual had submitted a card. I'm not sure if there's anyone else that would like to speak without the card.
I'm-
We don't need a card because it's petition.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. Whoever else would like to come up, please come up to the front here, take the microphone. Anybody else that would like to come up after that person, please sit up here in the front.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, folks, I forgot my overalls, because I don't own any. So, I have the latest paper, but yeah, because I don't run a farm, so I don't have any overalls. So this is the latest paper that I was given to by staff as far as options for me. I don't have any, these options aren't viable. I don't have a couple $100,000 to pour into this. I wasn't told this prior to this. We really need to be more transparent about when people come in and ask what is going to be required of us, that we need to be told that we need to have all of these buildings, we have to have all of these things, and then in the event that we're not prepared to do all of that, then we can back out, or we can figure out how to make that happen. But to tell us afterwards, after I fulfilled the list of requirements that was required of me, and then to come up later on is not fair. And we need to find something else, another way to do this, besides making me a mobile vendor and expecting me to move 2,000 plants twice a day. It's just not going to happen. Is there any way to tweak the code somehow so that I can be there? All of the amenities are there. And if we have to make a contract in the event that my landlord dies or sells or whatever it is, I'll vacate the premises if that's a problem. But right now, I have no problems with my landlord. My landlord is willing to work with me. I need the city to work with me too. That's
Well,
it.
I'm letting you finish
Yeah,
your
I'm
3
done.
Okay, then you can sit down.
Okay.
And stay right there, though. We may call you up again, okay?
Okay.
Ms. Visaka, you want to address this?
What Ms. Tooming is asking is that there be a retail business without a building. She does not want to put in improved parking, and the code, as I understand it, does not permit that.
Emma
Can I
Nelson?
reply to that?
No, right now, let's just let council talk, all right? And then you will have a chance to get back up.
Is there,
Member Nelson?
thank you, Mayor. Is there a compromise for that? Hey, any suggestions for a compromise?
There are lots of options that have been provided to Ms. Tooming. The property owner has not expressed an interest in consolidating his 2 pieces of property. He has not expressed an interest in allowing Ms. Tooming to operate on the M1 property where he currently has a business. And the council always can say, please rewrite the code so that a building is not required in commercial. I would never recommend that. I think that when you invite the public onto a piece of property, you should have ADA provisions, you should have a bathroom, you should have ways that it looks like it's a business that is open and safe for the public to attend. And so I can give you an example. During the most recent launch, sorry, that's an old word. During the most recent launch of the Falcon Heavy, a woman drove up to the building that is currently under construction for Blue Origin.
Correct.
She could not find a bathroom. She went into Blue Origin, which is still under construction, even though there are a few people still working there. When told that she could not come in to use the bathroom, she urinated in the bushes in front of the building. That's what happens when you invite the public onto a piece of property and you don't have all the facilities that you need.
So basically, if she were to be up against the business owner's property or building, that would work.
As I described to Mrs. Tooming and Mr. Daniel, that he's the property owner. In M1, there is outdoor storage is permitted, but he told me that he didn't have sufficient room there for her because he has his own enterprise. The idea of outdoor display, which is what Mrs. Tooming is suggesting, so she can display her plants for sale, that requires that it be within a certain distance of a building. Because the intent is that we not have, and some of you may remember the days when there was display in parking lots of things like used bicycles and old children's toys, and the code was amended so that that would not continue. It is almost impossible to allow something on this property that would not impact all of the community commercial zoning in the city.
And I think that's the problem, in that it's hard to carve out an exception for one person because then you're impacting everybody else.
Okay, I went to Growing Crazy. Growing Crazy has no building, none. They have no building.
That's true.
And they are stuck in the middle of a residential neighborhood. I went and took pictures. I tried to email them to you all, but your email doesn't accept large files. So Ace Hardware has product throughout the parking lot all the way to US 1. So
understand, and that's why I was asking Ms. Basaka, because.
So that is not within 3 feet of any building.
Rowing Crazies in the unincorporated area.
Correct.
According to the property appraiser, there are several buildings on the site. I only know what the property appraiser has on theirs and then what Google Maps show. But it is in the unincorporated area. And so that's not the same as the city of Titusville.
So, but then Ace Hardware, it has stuff outside, but it's also attached to a building. So
But it's
there's
supposed
still
to be,
facilities there.
It is supposed to be, and that would be an issue for code enforcement. I can certainly pass that information on to code enforcement, but that is not the same as a commercial enterprise without a building at all.
Okay.
Is anyone else allowed to speak?
No. Ma'am, you're not allowed to come up unless a member of council or myself asks you to come up.
sorry.
All right, please sit down, and we'll give you opportunity to talk, as I said. You can only do it, there is a protocol. Otherwise, everybody will be coming up all the time and fighting with each other to get the microphone. Anything else?
I don't have a magic wand.
Nope.
Not tonight.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. So, yeah, I just want to make sure I clarify. I think that Ms. Basaka's interpretation is spot on in line with our current code. And so just through this process, I just want to make sure that I differentiate maybe the desire or intent to be helpful in contrast to what staff is obligated to. And they're obligated to be helpful, but they're all obligated to comply with the code. So number one, I just want to make sure that I acknowledge that you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do is what I believe. As far as intent, I mulled this over. And what I tried to get to was what is the intent of what we're trying to achieve specific to community commercial and on a corridor, right? So at the end of the day, what I see is if I knew nothing of, if I knew absolutely nothing of city ordinances and could care less, what I see is there's a hunk of land and I can get some plants out there and I can get something up and going, and I might be able to start a business that could be successful down the road. And I got a property owner who's gonna lease that land, so in partnership with, it's support of another business by allowing them to make money and use of their property. Although it's, again, if I knew nothing of rules, I would just say, well, it's a hunk of grass and I can use it. So at its base, I go, would it hurt my feelings to have a nursery on the corridor front? Would that be acceptable to our city? I personally think that that would be okay, right? So I'm driving down the road and what do I see? A bunch of plants. I would be okay with that as part of our city. So I just say that from a threshold of where I'm at. Relative to the necessity of bathrooms, facilities, ADA compliance, those are all very real things. I think that the business that we're talking about is unique in nature. And the reason I say that is if we were talking about something that was not inherently like an outdoor business, and I believe that to be, it's plants. I mean, you're gonna spend your time outdoors. Inherently, there is something that is different in contrast to if I was selling some other kind of widget. And I think that that is unique in nature. So from where do we go from that? At least in a consideration, I would hope to take those considerations. How we apply that to the member's point is, we don't do this just for one, because the zoning is the zoning, and unless the property owner or somebody's moving to adjust that specific to this, that request is has a very large impact through our community. So I don't relegate this to a single instance, because I don't think it would be appropriate to do so specific to zoning. What I would, though, take a look at is if there is a unique portion that we could revisit to our code specific to outdoor businesses, I would welcome taking a look at that to see how it might impact. And the reason I say that is I believe that there are different modes of businesses that have evolved
that then challenge us with what we have now. As an example, traditional retail was retail, get a store, put stuff out, sell it at the store, and go. And then mobile retail, I get that idea, and so that's in and out. And I think for a large portion of Titusville's history, we've actually taken away, we're not trying to go that direction over the past 10 years. In so much as we actually limited that with food trucks within the city. So I look at that as precedent. But I also look at the development of internet sales. And if I am somebody who's involved in commerce, when I look at internet sales, I don't think competitively, are we asking more of a requirement from one retailer who's just doing a different mode than we are of another person who's choosing to do it on a piece of property. And that's one of the, I think, struggles that I'm having right now. Because if I'm an internet sale, I'm sitting in front of my house, I'm selling stuff all day, I don't have one bathroom for one customer, I have no ADA compliance. Well, in contrast to a retailer traditional, those things are mandated by our code. So I would be interested in seeing if there is avenues or considerations due to the unique aspect of businesses, and I use this as an example. I think it's an outdoor kind of thing, and I would be interested in seeing if our code could use adjustment specific to that. So that would be my recommendation, but I would open up to council and welcome your thoughts.
I'm a little confused by that. Doesn't most of the internet stuff come through the mail? I know we get them all the time through the mail. I don't sit out in front, though. So is that allowed under our ordinances? That
You can
somebody,
do a home occupation as
Yeah.
long as no one comes to your home
right?
and as long as the signage does not interfere with the community that you're in.
So
But
it
no
wouldn't-
one's allowed to come to your home.
Right. So that the factor of restrooms or anything else doesn't come into it because they're not going there. And home businesses have to be conducted electronically or through their homes. Okay. Member Stokel?
Well, Vice Mayor pretty much just kind of said along the lines of what I was thinking. Just in this instance with nurseries being a unique business of their sales need to kind of be outside with the plants. That being said, I wouldn't want this to be opening up for tents to be able to pop up and sell rugs and clothes and trinkets. So I'd be interested in seeing if we could potentially look at being able to allow for some type of unique business such as this. And then I wanted to address the other concern I had was, I think Ms. Tooming's frustration was she had met with somebody or contacted somebody prior and was under the impression that she was okay. Can you speak to that effect and kind of clarify
This is
what
what I
happened?
know. In 2000, prior to 2011, Twigs and Berries was located on Columbia Boulevard. It was very much what you and I would consider a nursery. It had greenhouses, and it did have a building, and it relocated in 2011 to this site. It was renewed, the BTR was renewed again in 2012, and at some time in that period of time, there was a plot plan that was drawn out that showed a small building for which a permit was issued, that showed a power pole, it showed stabilized parking, and a access from South Street. I believe it was 2013, Twigs and Berries went away. The building, if it was ever there, was removed. It was more of a shed than a standard, with a kind of standard foundation. The power pole still remains, and there is a pump that is located on the M1 property with a pipe that extends onto the CC property. Ms. Tooming came and asked how she could get a BTR. The lady who answered that question it no longer works at the city, but her standard response was, we will have to have a planner look at that and make sure that the zoning is consistent. When Ms. Tooming met with me a day or two later, she told me that Twigs and Berries had been there, so she knew that that she could also put on a nursery, and that she had taken out a loan because she was ready to get that BTR. We've been working with her since that time. We have not found any proof that the code has been amended between the time that Twigs and Berries was approved and the time that, and today. So all I can tell you is that the previous staff did not read the code the same way that we do. And if I could follow up, there is another use that is currently allowed in agricultural, and that's called a nursery. And again, we would, that use, you could extend to community commercial if you wanted to. That's one way to handle this. But you would also have to make it clear that no building was required, because I know of no use that does not require a building. As I said, Growing Crazy has one, Twigs and Berries had one, the place that I go to buy plants has a building. So I'm really not aware of anything except mobile structures that does not have some sort of building. And I don't know that the building department would even find it safe to simply say that you could connect to power on a power pole without, because I don't know that that would be adequate. When I talked to the building official today, he was not certain that that would be okay.
Member Diesel.
So, Ms. Busaka, if Mr. Daniels, the owner of the building, decided that he wanted to sell plants out in front of his building, like perhaps Home Depot or Ace, could he do that?
He could do it adjacent to on his M1 property, because, but it would have to be in conjunction with his primary business, because his M1 property is I think it's called Keep 'em Running, and it's a lawnmower repair business. So we would have to find that this was ancillary to that business. It could not be the primary business, because retail is not a use in M1. But
Okay. Yeah, and clearly there'd have to be some interpretation off of what, and that's what you were just doing there with the M1. Obviously, my outside-the-box thought is maybe there could be some business co-op there where he was doing his lawn care equipment, and she could do her plant selling, and he'd have to obviously be the owner of that because he owns the building.
Right, and I suggested that to Mr. Daniel, and Mr. Daniel said that there wasn't room on his property for that.
Okay. Well, and again, obviously, we sit up here and try to find win-wins, and there's not always win-wins, but as I'm writing down Home Depot and some of the things, Lowe's, Walmart even, you know, they've got the building and they have the plants on the outside. I'm thinking if he was to co-op with you off of his business and his building, perhaps that could be done, and that's about the best I got.
Member Nelson?
So do you have a need to connect to that power that's out there?
No.
So that may be a non-issue. Part of my thought is somebody obviously went through the code and made a determination at some point that Twigs and Berries was in compliance. And I'm sort of thinking that you might be right at agricultural without a building. And that might be the solution.
I want you to know that I would not recommend that. I
Okay.
think that putting agricultural in a community commercial zoning, think about what you can do in agricultural. You could have horses, you could have other animals that you may not want on your corridors or in your community commercial areas. Because
Well, the other,
agriculture, while it seems like it's very benign, can also be a very intense use.
could also be sort of smelly, but
It can, and so you have to think, do I want that in my community commercial areas where you could put restaurants, where you could put other retail, where you could put doctor's offices, where you can, all kinds of uses that are in community commercial. Do you want to put agriculture beside that?
actually, it would be easier to put nursery in community commercial and not require a building if it was a nursery.
And again, we can amend the code as you wish. I don't believe that staff is going to recommend, because in general, agriculture is different than other uses.
But not agricultural, nursery.
And you could absolutely do that without a building. Staff would not recommend that because of the mix of other uses that would be in CC. And the question would become, and I've seen enough zoning to say that someone has decided that not only do they want to have grow plants, but now they want to cook on a barbecue and serve food. Is that a restaurant or is that a farm?
Could it be done in such a manner as to restrict it to nurseries only?
As my question to you is, if you are serving 8 or 9 people a day on a use where I just bought these tomatoes right here and I'm just going to feed people tomato sandwiches, is that a restaurant or is that a farm?
That becomes a food establishment.
Well, then you would have to make sure that you knew exactly how you were going to define nursery, because we have seen people who started out doing one kind of restaurant become another kind of restaurant. And what we have been very careful with, because we learned a lesson on that barbecue, was that we want to be consistent with the state license that the individual has. There are 2 kinds of licenses. There is a stock dealer and there's a nursery. And a nursery is allowed to grow plants. A stock dealer is more like Ace Hardware that takes the plants and sells them. So we have been consistent with the state license in this of a nursery and allowed to grow plants. Now, Ms. Tooming has suggested little plants in pots. But how about if the next person wanted big plants not in pots? Or in the case of something I can think of, in a nursery, they also kept open areas where they had mulch and sand. And although Ms. Tooming doesn't want to do that, is that also not part of a nursery? And is that something that you want beside in your commercial district? Because that can, what happened in the experience I know about is the lady who lived next door didn't turn her air conditioner on, and the dust got from those mounds of open, ended up in her house.
Okay.
And so, as I said, it seems very easy when you've got a couple of pots, but think of 3,000 pots and all that, and Ms. Tooming doesn't want fertilizer, but how about if the next person does?
Yeah.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
Oh, wait 1 second.
Excuse
Oh,
me.
no, that was you.
Thank you.
No, I got it.
So and if council was agreeable, I would be interested to come back with nursery to community commercial, but prior to bringing that to us, just allowing council to get, I think maybe my hope would be that we would all have an opportunity to figure out what that specifically means prior to walking into chambers. Because in planning, there's typically, I think what I've learned is that there's always, one good intent in front of us, and then there's 10,000 that we don't think about, and I'm thankful that you do. But of those 10,000, 9,998 don't come, but it's the one that does come out of it that is a real stinker. So I would be interested in seeing nursery to community commercial with recommendations, and what I'm looking for is somewhat of a strict scrutiny of limitations, so that nursery doesn't turn into X, Y, or Z. But I think that we can, my hope would be that not just for this instance, but as a community, like, we would be okay with that. And I go, gateway to nature and space, plants are a part of, so I'm comfortable with that, and I think it fits our landscape. But I am agreeable that, do we want, a trough of animals and a big pile of manure, courtesy of agriculture? No. So find that balance and helping us understand that balance. That's what I would hope to move forward with.
City Attorney.
As council is debating this, I believe there was probably another member or two of the public that wanted to speak on this issue, so I would suggest you might want to hear from them before we close the issue, because I'd hate for you to come to the point where you may make a motion and then you have more speakers that change your mind. I might want to ask any speakers on this issue to come up.
Well, we'll let this lady come up and speak one more time, then we'll take the next one.
Sure.
Ma'am?
Okay. I'm good you all are working with me, and I'm willing to work with you all. If it's necessary for me to put a building on the property, something that is not astronomical, something small, I'm willing to do that. I don't want to do storage. I'm not interested in storage. I'm not interested in becoming a farm. We need to get that out of our vocabulary. I'm not a farm, I'm not storage. But I'm willing to work with the city of Titusville. You got today the options that I was given. Some of it is contradictory. So that's it. I just want to thank you all for working with me.
Thank you. I hope you understand that there is nothing personal about this. As you can see,
Yes, sir.
most of the people up here are trying to figure out a way to do it. The problem is that when you take an unusual situation and you do it in an unusual place, then it's what we call a slippery slope, and I've said that a lot lately, that you do it in one, and then somebody else wants to do that or something like that in another area, and it's all of a sudden you have kind of no longer have a cohesive zoning. You have things that are showing up all over the place, so it's difficult to completely change it. I wish the person you're renting or leasing from could be more cooperative with you, because some of that property can be done on.
The problem is that there's only 10 feet by 100 feet. So if we do that, then there's no room, to be quite frank with you. There's just literally, there's no room. So, the woman that I spoke to originally, I asked all of these questions. She got on her little box, she did whatever it was that she did, and she told me, yes, it was fine. And then I asked specifically for the paperwork that was needed to be done. And she gave me a list of the paperwork, which included a Department of Agriculture inspection, which is normally not done until after the plants are on the property. They inspect plants. So I even arranged for that and paid for that. And then I didn't actually speak to Peggy until three weeks later, when I suddenly found out that I had been denied my tax certificate for the city. Which was quite a surprise, because as far as I was concerned, I had done everything that the city had required me to do. They gave me a list of things, and I fulfilled those. So it's not that my landlord is not willing to work with me. There's just not any room there to work with.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to this issue? Come right up. Bring a kid.
Thank you, and I appreciate that you guys do seem willing to work with her.
Your name for the record?
Melissa Kennelly.
And address.
my address.
Is it in Titusville?
It's Titusville, yes. So I came tonight. I've never come. I have 6 kids, so I don't normally come to these things.
Actually, it's been kind of fun watching them, so.
So I met Patricia, or Miss Tooming, probably 3 weeks ago or so. I looked on Craigslist for some plants. I love plants. And she had some for sale, so I went to her home. And she's talked with me for probably 30 to 40 minutes about the different plants, what she had, what was available, where they would work well. She gave me her personal cell phone number so that I could text her with any problems or concerns. And she said, even if it's not a plant you bought from me, because I used to have a great nursing point in Sienna. When I moved here to Titusville, I don't know, I lost my green thumb. So I've had trouble here with soil issues, and she spent time going over that with me. I've gone to Lowe's, I've gone to Home Depot, I've gone to Ace. They don't do that. You don't get that kind of help from those places. I feel like this is an important thing. I mean, look at, we're losing bees, we're losing our ability to grow food because we're not having, we don't have the plants, we don't have, sorry, we don't have the resources that we need. And she is willing to grow plants in her own yard that she's worked for 2 years to make sure that they're viable options for here, for our specific city. And then to give those plants out to people, to give that knowledge to people. I feel like this is a resource that is necessary and vital to our community. So I just feel like, I know you're trying to work with her, but I feel like this is important. This isn't a big box store that's gonna say, oh, here, read the label, this is how you grow it. She's gonna sit down and talk with you and tell you how to do it, and we need that in our community. We need that in our world. She's willing to teach children. She engaged all my children in how to grow the plants, what they were, what they needed. And we're trying to build a better future for our kids, and we need that kind of knowledge to be passed on to the next generation. So I feel like it's an important thing. It's not, I mean, maybe it's, you know, a specific thing. Maybe it's out of the box. I've been to Growing Crazy with my kids. They didn't have a bathroom. And somehow my children managed not to pee on the bushes. So I feel like it's not always necessary to have a bathroom. So anyway, that's...
Ma'am, your argument is
two
very
cents.
compelling. It's the reason that we're looking to try and find some way.
I know, I
But
appreciate that.
the bottom line is, we don't judge who's going to open the business or how they're going to operate it. We judge the zoning.
Right,
It's a
and
whole different
as you
world.
said, you know, if we could look for specific language in the code that would make it that the next person wouldn't have a horse farm, that it would be specific to plant nurseries in the way that she would want them to be run. I feel like that's
Okay, thank
viable
you.
option.
Perfect timing. Anyone else wish to speak?
My name is Jeannie Huppert, and Linda and I have a plant swap group on Facebook, and I met Patricia about 3 weeks also because she was having the sale, and I agree with the other speaker. She's very knowledgeable, and I know you have codes they have to go by. I don't know much about a mobile unit. Surely they don't have a bathroom on a mobile unit, but if they do, I still can't picture anyone, you know, carrying plants in and out, you know, to go sell them on the streets. But if a bathroom is required, I've been Growing Crazy too, but if it is required, maybe a portalet maybe to have there for an emergency, because I've gone to other places where there's not access to restrooms, and I mean, she's the most knowledgeable person. Really, she is. Like she said, she takes the time, and she knows her plants, and competition's good. I mean, we have, you know, you can see by our restaurants, we have more than one hamburger restaurant and more than one Cumberland Farms. You know, it is good, and you can't get everything at one particular place. And, you know, she has things that I haven't. I had to go to, what's it called, over in the Atlantic Beach, Harbor Sun or something, a Primera place. But, you know, why go out of town when you can bring your business in town? And it's easier for the community right here. I think it would look pretty myself, the area. I think it would look pretty with the plants growing. But, you know, I recommend her. You know, she's very knowledgeable, and I think we need something like that in town.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Sir, I would ask you if you have something different to say, otherwise we could be here for quite some time. So I'm not admonishing you, I'm just saying that everything seems to be getting repeated at this point, so.
I'll try not to repeat anything.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm Bill Boylan. I just think this lady's arguments about the future with tomato sandwiches and barbecues is ludicrous. You can't project the future, what's going to happen. We might get hit by meteorites tomorrow. Who knows? So those arguments, they're I think, useless. The lady wants to grow plants and sell plants. I don't see where that's a big problem. Make the code work for her. Thank you.
Fine, thank you, sir. You can sit down. I'm going to make a statement, though.
Okay.
I think that's the very point of what she was saying. You can't tell what's going to happen tomorrow. This lady may be fine. The next person may want to put something that is terrible there and can do it under that zoning. But that's what we're up against, because all of a sudden, they would ask what you, I think, asked on the other one being there. Why was that allowed in the first place? And so it's not quite as easy as you might think. So we're still trying to work on it, but it's easier said than done because of what might happen in the future. Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak? I see no one. Council? What's your pleasure? Go.
I'm Sasha Meyer. I live in Titusville also.
Ma'am, could you come up to the microphone and say that, please?
Sasha Meyer. I live in Titusville.
Thank you.
I'd just like to piggyback a little bit differently on what they said about Patricia's knowledge. To my knowledge, there's nowhere in town that you can go to get help with pests on your plants in your garden. I recently had mealybugs. I'm from Montana, so I didn't know what the heck those were. Patricia helped me, and now I don't have them anymore. So that is really great. There's nowhere else that you can go here to get help with that kind of problem. It would just destroy all my hard work. And I'm really thankful that she was there, so I hope that she gets the opportunity to open this business because it would be really valuable for our community.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, now to council. Anybody want to speak?
Well, I think Matt, Vice Mayor, had an idea of a direction to see if this will work at narrowly drafting language which would permit a nursery. So I think that's the direction everybody is sort of hoping we can take. Am I right?
I think we have a consensus on that. Ms. Pasaka, if you will do what you can, and also let us know the issues, so we can make a proper judgment. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Next is the consent agenda.
Yes, sir, we have no cards. Does any council member, would they like to pull any of the consent agenda items? Okay, I'll read all the consent agenda items for the record, and Mayor, there will be a roll call vote required upon our reading.
Yes, sir.
Consent agenda item 8A, approve the award of a continuing consulting contract to SM&E Incorporated, piggybacking its contract with the City of Melbourne expiring on May 16th, 2020, with 2 optional years, 2-year renewals to perform historic preservation services, and authorize the city manager to execute the piggyback agreement. Consent agenda item 8B, approve the award of contract bid number 18B039 to Brevard Aluminum Construction Company Incorporated of Titusville, Florida, for the replacement of the Osprey plant chemical storage tank canopy in the amount of $15,776, and authorize the city manager to execute the contract. Consent agenda item 8C, the Fire and Emergency Services Department is requesting approval to accept an annual Pilot Club mini grant in the amount of $300 for the purchase of bicycle helmets. Consent agenda item 8D, approve the award of work order BFA WR002 to Barnes, Furlan and Associates of Orlando, Florida in the amount of $127,692 to provide engineering consulting services, including but not limited to the preparation of design drawings specifications, permitting, bidding assistance, and construction administrative services for the installation of 3,300 linear feet of 10-inch water lines along the South Carpenter Road, and authorize the mayor to execute the work order. Consent agenda item 8E, approve the award of work order WPWR 001 to Wright Pierce Incorporated of Orlando, Florida, in the amount of $115,025 to provide engineering consulting services, including but not limited to preparation of design drawings and specification permitting, bidding assistance, and construction administrative services for the Marina Lift Station improvements, and authorize the mayor to execute the work order. Consent agenda item 8F, authorization to cover shortfalls for the Red, White, and Boom fundraising efforts from the city's general fund, operating fund accounts not to exceed $10,000. Consent agenda item 8D, appropriate and approve the use of $10,000 in forfeiture funds for repair and maintenance of forfeiture vehicles. Appropriate and approve the use of $15,461 in forfeiture funds to purchase 2 ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, from Spaceport Cycles of Titusville, Florida, in the amount of $15,461. Consent agenda item 8H, approve resolution number 132018, right-of-way application number 1-2018, declaring that a definite time and place of public hearing will be held to consider vacating, abandoning, and discontinuing certain public streets located at Parker Drive north of Block 62, revised plat in Indian River City Plat, Book 4, page 12, in Section 22, Township 22, South, Range 32 East. Consent agenda item 8I, approve the selection committee's final ranking of professional engineering consultants for continuing contracts of RFQ 17Q30, Code 118, municipal regulatory review, and authorize the staff to conduct negotiations with the top selected firm, and if satisfactory agreement cannot be reached with the number one ranked firm, contract negotiations will formally be terminated and contract negotiations will be undertaken with the second ranked firm, and so on. Consent agenda item 8J, approve change order number 2 in the amount of $118,625 to Water Reclamation BPO 13651 with T. Wayne Hill Trucking Company, Biosolids Transportation and Disposal, and authorize the city manager to put in place the instruments necessary to process said change order. Consent agenda item 8K, request approval of one master lease agreement from City National Capital Finance Incorporated and 2 lease schedule number 1 to finance and purchase of 10 new police cars with radios to replace the vehicles being deadline from the police fleet. 1 code enforcement vehicle, 1 fire department response vehicle and radio, roads and street vehicle, 1 roads and street backhoe to replace old backhoe, and 1 solid waste side loader to replace an old side loader. Resolution 12/2018 is included with this request. Consent agenda item 8L, approve the sketch plat for Willow Creek subdivision. Consent agenda item 8M, approve advisability for staff to review the code relating to bond of site improvements and provide recommendations to council. Consent agenda item 8N, approve advisability to create an agreement subject to acceptance by the terms of the city manager and city attorney for the private owner of Helen Hauser Boulevard to make the necessary improvements to meet the city of Titusville standards and record necessary right-of-ways to transfer the road to the city of Titusville and place under city maintenance. Consent agenda item 8O, approve the West 50 Plaza small-scale plat and amendment declaration of covenants. Consent agenda item 8P, rescind the award of the contract to Dixler Incorporated and approve the award to contract AA Associates Staffing Incorporated of West Palm Beach, Florida, in the amount of $109,200 annually to provide day labor services for various city operations, including a 1-year term with 3 optional 1-year renewals, and authorize the mayor to execute the contract.
Okay, everything's been read. Motion, I need a motion to approve consent agenda items A through P.
I'll make that motion.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I think Member Diesel got that one. there any further discussion? I'll call for a vote. It has to be a roll call vote. Vote, please, clerk.
Member Diesel?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Behringer?
Yes.
Member Stockel?
Passes unanimously. Next item, 9A. City Attorney?
Yes, sir. 9A is ordinance number 23, 2018, relating to assembly uses, recreational, commercial, amusement, and churches. Ordinance number 23, 2018, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending the land development regulations by amending Chapter 28 relating to assembly uses, specifically amending Section 2854 Use Table, Section 28236 Church, and Section 28275 Recreation and Commercial Amusement Indoor, providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinances, an effective date, and incorporation into land development regulations. And this is the first reading and first public hearing of this ordinance.
Yes, sir. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval as action 4-0, and Ms. Bisacca is available to answer any questions you may have on this first reading.
Any questions for Ms. Bisacca? I see none. I'll close the public hearing. Oh, first, are there any cards?
No, sir.
No cards. I'll close the public hearing. No vote is necessary. It's the first reading. Next item, ordinance number 24, 2018.
This is ordinance number 24, 2018, an ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending the land development regulations relating to community centers, specifically amending Section 2854 Use Table and Section 28238 Community Centers to expand the zoning classifications in which community centers are a permitted, limited, or conditional use, and providing for standards for community centers as a permitted use with limitation and a conditional use, providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinances, an effective date, and incorporation into the land development regulations. And this is the first reading and first public hearing of this ordinance.
Planning and Zoning Commission recommended 4-0 for approval with the following recommendations. Number 1, delete residential zoning districts RE, RR, R1A, R1B, and R1C from consideration as an allowable conditional use. Number 2, have a clear definition for public agency. And number 3, the nonprofits need to be approved as a conditional use on a case-by-case basis. And this is your first reading.
First reading. Are there any cards on this?
No, sir.
No cards. I'll close the public hearing, and there's nothing further on that.
Can I
Yes.
add to this?
Sorry.
You gotta shoot me. Ms. Bisacca, would it be, you know, I tend to read everything. Wouldn't it be easier to turn around, and this is just a language thing, and instead of under, let's see, Section 2C. Yeah. Wouldn't it be easier to, instead of saying, get rid of the part about the property should be adjoining an intersection of DeLeon and Park, and just say, in an urban mixed-use zoning district, or in a neighborhood commercial, blah, 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 and go on?
Are you on page 401,
Which page I'm on?
section 2C,
Yes, I am.
and you want to say,
I was just sort of like, you know, some of our,
yes, ma'am, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Certainly, we can make that change. It's been advertised for that.
it just seemed to make it a little clearer
Okay,
without
great.
a lot of problems there.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion.
Does the council want to talk to that issue? Is that acceptable? Consensus agenda? You, Vice Mayor, you have a light on?
Thank you. I guess my only one was that I don't feel the need to limit it to nonprofit solely. I get the intent that traditionally nonprofit agencies would be the ones that would implement a community center.
Yeah.
But as a matter of fact, the Indian River Civic Center was a for-profit entity since its inception until about a year ago. And under this as written, that would not have been acceptable. So I understand that the idea of a nonprofit is, it's good to the community, but I don't think the tax status of how somebody's running a business necessarily facilitates the requirement.
This is the issue staff had. We couldn't decide how you were going to determine the difference between a community center and, let's say, a place that charged you to have a billiard hall. And I don't think that people want to have, at least it's been my experience, that people don't want billiard halls in their neighborhoods. But community centers, where they're the ones going to the community center, they feel differently about. So if we limited it to a nonprofit, then we could say, you're not a billiard hall. So if you could help us work through how to figure that out, that really was the intent.
Yeah.
And we have had I've lived through a couple of instances where someone has come in for rezoning for a billiard hall, and people were very upset. And it was on Courtney Parkway, which is not a very, low-key residential neighborhood. But they said there's all kinds of activities that can occur there that they didn't want in their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So if you could help us think that through, because we're certainly not trying to penalize a group like the Indian River Civic Center.
Right.
But that's what our issue.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back on that, maybe and think through that.
That would be helpful for us.
Yeah, just because I've seen nonprofits can be used equally, because the moment I say, well, it's an athletic league where we focus on billiards, my tax status,
Right, and that's what, so anything that you could do, that would be
Okay,
great.
thank you.
All right, any further discussion on that? If not, close the public hearing, and there's no vote necessary. Next item is 9C.
9C is ordinance number 25, 2018, relating to airport and air park regulations. An ordinance of the City of Titusville, Florida, amending the land development regulations to adopt exhibits related to the Arthur Dunn Air Park impact areas, which were inadvertently deleted from the code, specifically amending sections 2944 Air Park and Airport Height Notification Zone and Regulations, 2945 Air Park and Airport Runway Protection Zone and Regulations, 2946 Air Park and Airport Noise Impact Zone and Regulations, 2947 Navigation Easements Waiver of Claims Notice of Disclosure, 2948 Construction Modification Air Park and Airport Noise Impact Zone, 2949 Other Regulations, and 2952 Air Park and Airport Impact Areas, providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinances, an effective date, and incorporation into land development regulations. And this is the first reading and first public hearing of this ordinance.
Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of this action 4-0, and staff is standing by for any questions council may have.
Any questions for Ms. Busacco? Not hearing any, I'll close the public meeting. This is a first reading also, so no vote is, are there any cards on this?
No, sir.
No, nothing is needed further on that one. We'll go to D.
Yes, sir. At this time, I could read the quasi-judicial proceedings if you'd like.
Yes, sir.
During the public hearing portion of this meeting, anyone wishing to speak on a quasi-judicial item must first sign a public hearing agenda card and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table. I believe it's now on the side of the council chambers. Those speaking in favor of requests will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. Witnesses may be cross-examined by the applicant, counsel, staff representatives, and such other representatives as authorized by the council. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the city council to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the city clerk. City clerk, have all persons wishing to speak before the city council signed an oath card?
Yes, sir.
If there is anyone present who has not signed an oath card that wishes to speak on a quasi-judicial item, please submit a card at this time to the clerk. City clerk, have all agenda items been properly advertised?
Yes, sir.
Have any council members visited any of the sites or spoken to any members of the public regarding an item to be reviewed?
No.
Yes. I did speak to Lisa McCotter shortly, who said she would be here tonight, but we did not go into any detail. Yeah,
Okay, so you form no opinions, and there's no discussion regarding the item to be?
no, it was just basically, I'll be here tonight.
Thank you.
The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to establish an indoor play area, playground, which is considered a recreational and commercial amusement indoor per the land development regulations. The proposed facility will be located in an existing unit of the Titusville Mall. The Titusville Mall is located at 3550 South Washington Avenue within the Regional Commercial RC zoning district. The proposed indoor play area will be approximately 2,400 square feet in area. However, this approval would allow for the use to occupy a space up to 4,000 square feet. No expansion of existing building is proposed as part of this request. The use will utilize existing parking and ingress-egress points for vehicular access to the property. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this action 4-0 with the recommendation to allow for the use of the occupied space in the existing building up to 5,700 square feet.
If I could,
Yes, ma'am, you're next.
I just wanted to say that in the staff review, that we reviewed this for consistency with the comprehensive plan and found that there were no issues. Because the existing Titusville Mall will be utilized, there are no issues with ingress and egress. The proposed use is similar in hours and of operation and intensity to the other uses. We don't find that it will cause a nuisance. The proposed indoor play area will be within the existing mall, so we expect impacts to the adjacent properties to be minimum. And based on the above recommendation, staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit. As you saw, the proposal was modified by Planning and Zoning to recommend up to 5,700 square feet. Staff has no problem with that. We feel that this is a totally compatible use, and so it's fine.
Okay. Does council have any questions of staff? Go right ahead.
I was just curious where that 5,700 number came from.
I believe it's the size of one of the units that
Okay.
they may want to move into.
Okay.
Now, frankly, I don't know that any size would be necessarily required to be limited if they wanted to move around. I think the use is acceptable, but conditional use permits are looked upon as things that may cause additional intensity. I don't necessarily see that in a facility this large. So that could be council's decision whether they want to move forward with any kind of requirement for size. But that is, my understanding is that it was determined based on one of the other units that they may want to go into.
So just kind of being proactive
Yes,
potentially?
that's right.
they
So
don't
that they,
have to.
because what P and Z didn't want is for this applicant to have to come back.
Gotcha.
If they
Okay.
change their
Nope,
mind.
that makes perfect sense.
Okay. I'll open the public hearing. Clerk, are there any cards on this item?
Yes, sir. 2 cards. The first is the applicant, Christy Jones.
Please come up, ma'am.
I'm Christy Jones. I live in Titusville. I just wanted to introduce myself to everybody because I have actually never been to one of these, and I'm very excited about, bringing this to the community. I have 2 children of my own, my husband and I. He's not here today because he's at home with them, but we're doing this together, so we're very excited about that, and we're very excited about bringing something to the community for kids to do indoors when the summer, during the summer heat and the rain, and also for children of like special needs. My son has autism, so he seeks sensory input a lot, and we're really excited about like being able to help with those kinds of things too for children. So that's it. I just wanted to introduce myself. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next card, please.
Lisa McCotter.
Hi, Lisa McCotter, Titusville. I am the general manager of Titusville Mall, and we are very excited to have the Little Ninjas Gym, which is the name of the business. It's bouncy houses and different types of activities for kids really 12 and under. So it's servicing young children. And Christy, of course, I've met she and her family throughout this process. And I love it that they're young and they want to invest in our community. They have just moved here, and I love that too, that someone just coming into our community wants to improve it. I've seen different areas in the facility where she's going to have things like a nursing room for moms to nurse, and this is a time where the parents stay on site. This is not a drop-off place. The parents will be there, which I love too, because I feel like it encourages family. And as a grandmother, I'm excited to bring my grandchildren there. It's wonderful on rainy days and hot days to have a place other than the bowling alley to go, which is really where we usually end up playing the games or bowling. So now we have something new, and that's wonderful for our community. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other? I'm sorry?
Oh, no, I heard that, I know. That's actually, okay, wait, can I speak on that?
Yes, sir.
I did want to say with this age limit, I don't know if you guys had considered potentially doing it for, or having certain nights maybe that would be 13 to 17 or like a teen night or something potentially, depending on, I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, that's all. I still wouldn't qualify, but it's okay.
It's all right.
You can't go.
All right. You might pass, though. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Council, any discussion? I hear none. I'll accept the motion then. I'm sorry, you had a light on.
Oh,
You want to speak?
sorry.
You'd
Well,
like
I
to.
just thought it was a great idea. I was going to make your motion for you.
Okay, go right ahead.
Move to approve the conditional use permit to allow an indoor play area up to 5,700 square feet.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please, clerk.
Member Nelson.
Yes.
Mayor Johnson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Behringer.
Yes.
Member Stockel.
Yes.
Member Diesel.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Congratulations.
Is there a size limit?
Definitely. Definitely.
They got the extra large caterer?
Speaking for yourself there, Member Diesel.
Woo. Okay, next item is 11A.
Yes, sir. In response to a citizen's request at the May 22nd, 2018 meeting, Council approved advisability to review the conservation subdivision to increase flexibility in the development standards within the proposed subdivisions. After significant discussion and review of best practices in other jurisdictions, staff does not support amending the existing conservation subdivision code provisions. When staff developed the conservation subdivision, it was with the understanding that it would be applicable to limited situations because the process is administrative and does not include a public hearing process. Staff's concern is that the decisions to administratively reduce setbacks and other development standards would go beyond the legislative body's delegation of authority. The planning department process is an alternative to the conservation subdivision. This process allows the developer to customize development standards as lot size, setbacks, and other zoning standards through a public hearing process and council approval. Staff believes the public hearing process is more appropriate in order to better understand the community's concern and input regarding the proposed development. In the case of the citizen who brought the issue forward, there are several issues which preclude the use of conservation subdivision including location within the area of critical concern limitations on density established by the previous zoning action. Staff is here to answer any questions that you may have on this action.
Council, any questions? We see none. I have a question. Is there a credit, because they have to have retention on those properties too, is there any credit that could be given if there's an existing wetland that is a retention area?
Yes. Currently, if you are within the area of critical concern, you have a minimum of 10,000 square feet. Last year, the code was amended to allow a smaller square footage for lots if you preserve 50% of the property. And unfortunately, the property owner does not own the 40-acre wetland to the west of the piece that he wanted to purchase that could be used for that 50%. So there's an 80-acre parcel that is actually was previously rezoned to limit it to 73 units over the entire 80 acres. Mr. Barnavon, who came to speak, is only interested in the eastern 40. So he doesn't have the wetlands to use as the open space on that are on the western 40. So if he had decided to put an offer on the entire property, then he would have had the 50% wetlands that would allow him to reduce the setback. The minimum lot sizes.
So,
Did I confuse you? My husband says I have a knack.
You didn't confuse us.
Okay.
No, but the question, I'm not sure that you did answer it.
Okay.
Because I'm asking, regardless of the size.
Okay.
If they have a percentage of the property that's already water retention area, can they get credit as far as the size of their other required water retention?
Well, if it's a retention area, the answer is no, because that is not considered, that the whole point of the conservation subdivision is to conserve open space. But a retention pond is not considered to be open space. It's considered to be a requirement of the code. Does that make sense? Now, in the case, for instance, in the case of a recent subdivision that we had, there was credit given if the retention ponds were improved so that there was some sort of recreational amenity. For instance, let's say that they put a boardwalk along there so people could walk along that, then it would be a recreational amenity, then it was credited. But simply as a retention pond, the code doesn't contemplate that.
So in any case, they would have to build another retention pond regardless of the size of the wetland?
No, I wouldn't think, I don't know why they'd have to build another retention pond.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is there a requirement, even though you have a wetland area, to build retention ponds?
Okay, if the retention that is on site is sufficient for the proposed development, no new retention is required. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
But-
but we have to do the calculations to make sure that it's adequate for the development.
And what if it needs new retention?
Then they would probably have to increase the existing retention.
What? I'm sorry.
They would have to increase the existing retention. They may not, because what we don't want is to create a subdivision that would flood the neighbors. And so if they had a retention that was sized for 50 units and they decided to put 100 units on, there would be additional retention required.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. Took a while, but I see.
I think it was my issue.
Is there anyone, any cards on this item? Wait,
No, sir.
okay, I do have lights. Member Nelson?
So as I understand it, if you have 100 acres, say 50 acres are wetland, then you can build on that turn that into conservation, and you build on the other 50 acres.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. Still need a stormwater somewhere in there.
Yes, ma'am. But it would be on the 50, yes, ma'am, you're right.
Build it on the 50 acres that's already wetland.
Correct. Because it needs to be conserved as it is.
Okay. I appreciate you guys looking at it, though.
Well,
Just wanted to let you know.
thank you. The concern was that if staff starts determining setbacks, if they start determining lot size as well as lot coverage, and the neighbors don't get the opportunity to make their wishes known, then their staff could end up making some decisions that the neighbors and the council did not feel were appropriate. The public hearing process allows that, and so that's where the greater flexibility goes, because it has the opportunity for public comment and for council decision. And we didn't feel that you wanted, nor was it appropriate to delegate certain things to staff, because that does impact the adjoining neighbors.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. So my concern, I don't know if I have it addressed at this point, and I think it goes outside the scope of the specific policy and process that we have. At the end of it, what I heard, at least from one person coming, was a developer saying there is challenges with the land, specifically just the land that we have left, right? So from a city, from an inventory, if I want to walk in here and I want to build houses, that we have less land than we did before. So I think that that's a fair statement. That is a concern to me. And I do not currently feel, because I have not asked, for somebody to give me an overview of where we're at. Because what I don't want to do is the sky is falling when it's not. But in the same sense, if there is at least pressures to developers at this point and people that want to bring houses to our community, I want to make sure that I have a good understanding accurately of those pressures that they're feeling and how that correlates to the city. And I don't feel that I have that. Again, I haven't asked. So I would, in order to, I think, better look at this fairly, I would like to find out what those are from staff's perspective. The second was, until I know that, I don't think I can make a wise decision on that. But subsequent, I just want to make sure that if I am a developer and there is a chunk of land that I can develop, and next to my land that there is wetlands that are in conservation, could be made to conservation, especially if it's public or so on and so on, that if there is by proximity the ability to use what is already there, that would be a portion of our planning. Because I just want to make sure that we're not asking for redundancy for the sake of, if we're meeting the intent. So,
This isn't a full answer, but if it makes you feel any better, over the last few years, this council has approved several things that make it easier to work on those marginal lands. First of all, in the previous zoning, in order to get a planned unit development, you had to do both a rezoning and a comprehensive plan amendment, which could take anywhere from 4 months to 8 months. Under the PD process, the plan development process, no amendment is required to the comprehensive plan. That cuts the cost in half for the processing, and it cuts the time down to what it takes for a rezoning. It still allows the public input and the final decision to be yours as to the master plan. And the reason for that is because a plan development, the developer is writing his own specs. The property's this size, the setbacks are this size, this many units. And so that gives you the opportunity to see that, as well as the neighbors to have input. The second thing that we have done is conservation subdivision. While it does not require any public hearing, but it doesn't have as much flexibility for that reason. And in addition to that, we have worked very hard to make this, streamline this as much as we can. But the truth is, all of the, in general, the lands that are left are less able to be developed, and we still feel that there is absolutely a part to play for the public hearing process and council decisions. And I'd be delighted to meet with you and talk about it in more detail, and you may see something we don't.
I would appreciate that.
Of course.
Member Stokel?
I think most of my questions were just answered, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Staff is recommending that we don't make any amendments to this. One, because they want to make sure that we're conserving a good amount of wetlands. Two, you want to make sure that it goes through this process here and you guys are not just making those decisions arbitrarily.
Yes, ma'am.
And then flooding issues potentially, I heard that in there. Is that another one?
Well, what we review that when we get to the
Okay.
stormwater. The point is that if you are creating stormwater, you need to handle it on your property,
Okay.
not to impact a neighbor.
Okay.
And that is part of the review process.
Okay. Anything else I'm missing, or are those the main ones, the main concerns?
Those are the main concerns, but again, staff would be delighted to meet with anyone and explain, and as I said, you may see something we don't see.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Member Diesel?
Appreciate everything you've done on this, and we have talked before, and I say a lot to people that, you know, Titusville's booming, we're growing, we're way out there. With that said, I think we have to be out in front of the curve when it comes to infrastructure and things like that, and also in conservation. And I appreciate the effort you've put into this, and I appreciate the line you said as I read this, thus staff's concern is that decisions to administratively reduce setbacks and other development standards would go beyond the legislative body delegation authority, which to me, when some people get, you know, fired up and tied up about perhaps staff overreaching or even the council overreaching, I think that line said to me, you know, we really think about this and we don't want to overreach and we don't want to go beyond our ability or our authority. And I appreciated that line, and I appreciate what you've done with this. Thank you.
Understand, I'm just the face of many. The staff works as a team, but I'll pass that on to
And
them.
it depends on
Thank
what
you.
they're saying sometimes
The
too,
lady
right?
with 1,000 faces, huh? You remember that picture? Where are we right now? We've had a discussion. I don't hear anything that requires a...
I don't believe it does unless there was any direction that you wanted to provide.
Other than what the vice mayor was talking about, and I think that's been cleared, he's going to talk to you. I guess, so there's no motion necessary. We're accepting staff's recommendation. Do we vote on that?
Correct, I think we're going to find out, is there any additional direction for staff, or do you accept the report as provided by Ms. Bisaka? And I'd make that motion.
Good.
You want that in a motion form?
Yes.
Then I would make that motion.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, same sign. It passes unanimously. Thank you, ma'am. Next item.
Yes, sir. Item 12A, the city's land development code establishes maximum building height regulations for each zoning district. In addition, height can be limited due to the proximity to airports per FAA and FDOT regulations. Maximum building height was widely discussed during 2006-2007 timeframe, including the consideration of a charter amendment to limit all buildings within the city to not more than 35 feet. With the increasing development of larger heights per story of residential structures, as well as the potential to elevate structures above the rising flood elevations, peril of flood, there's an increasing pressure to reconsider the maximum building height in some or all of our areas of the city. Staff is seeking council's direction on conducting a workshop to discuss the desirability of amending the maximum height regulations.
Okay. I'm going to jump in on this one. I was here during that period of time when that vote was taken, and the voters voted down the 35 feet, but there were still certain changes made over the years. I think it would be worthwhile having a workshop to see how the public feels about it, and also to find recommendations from staff as to where it would be advised and where it would not be advised. So I will let the next person speak. Member Nelson.
I was just going to say I agree with you. I wasn't here for that. I was here. I was living here. I remember some of the discussion, but I would like to see and hear the pros and cons. We only have a certain amount of property. I would rather see some of our property saved for environmental purposes and have us go up as opposed to go out and use all the property.
That's quite correct. That somehow got ignored in that whole, on one side of the argument, unfortunately. It actually is smart growth to keep the footprint as small as possible by going up higher. Now, I'm not saying it should be, 200 feet in the air or anything like that, but it is smart growth because then you can have breezeways and so forth. And actually, people can see the river or whatever better. Because the other way, they spread out, and if it's 20 feet, it's too high to see it. So I think it's worth having that. Okay, Vice Mayor, that's you.
Thank you. So I'll go one further, but it's at the comfort of council. Personally, I don't see the need of a workshop. And the reason that I say that is because I am in agreement to revisit the validity of the ordinance as such, and I don't believe it's necessary in my opinion. I think that the cause of how we got there was not reflective of the majority of the public at the time. I think the intent, we've had some time to implement what I think the intent of the ordinance was. And at the end of it, I think of the riverfront acquisition. So there are portions of our river that we have purchased, we have designated, and in my opinion, can't necessarily fund for continued ongoing maintenance and development for use. That poses a challenge. Being said, if there are additional residents coming to Titusville in buildings that go up instead of out, the moment you put a one-story building on the river, I still can't see from the road. So whether it's one story or equivalent to what we currently have, no more, no less, I think our community has, and I'll use the Harbor Point as an example. That community, one, brings a lot of people to Titusville, and number two, our downtown has been kept up because of it through the taxes raised for the CRA. So because of all of that reason, I don't feel the necessity of a workshop, because I think that advisability questions are something that can be handled at council, unless the council really feels there's such a concern. But I don't think that same driving concern is present, because I don't think it was the majority of people at the time. But I'll do whatever.
Well, the majority of the people voted not to limit it to 35.
Right, exactly.
So, Member Nelson.
Thank you. And the only reason I would say a workshop is because I think you're going to get, The only reason I'd suggest a workshop is I think you're going to get people in who do want to speak. We do need to figure out what would be an appropriate height limitation, and just might be easier to do it as a workshop. Other than that,
Well, in thinking what the Vice Mayor said, I mean, we could ask staff to do recommendations as to what heights in general be. And of course, it's going to be advertised, so, I mean, they'll have the ability to come in and give public comment on what we're doing, so I would have no problem with that.
I could do it either way. I will say that.
Member Diesel?
I guess the either way thing works for me. I simply want to, apparently there's quite a passion on both sides of that issue. And I'd like to hear them because I'm not quite sure. You know, my first thought is as well, you know, if the building's 2 stories high, I can't see the river. So if it's 5 or 15 or, well, we won't get hired now to get in trouble probably. But I agree. I don't quite understand that. One of the things I'd be concerned about, and it's off topic slightly, is when we go higher rise, we have more people, more cars, more traffic, more infrastructure issues. And that's when I think we start thinking about, well, how high do we, you know, it looks good, and whether it's 10 or 15, no big deal, it all looks good, and the river's blocked, but it's, you know, again, it's blocked at 2 stories. But it's the extra 5 stories that adds that many more people and that much more traffic and that much more water issue. That's just something I've been thinking about. When we go condo versus, you know, 20 stories versus 10, you've doubled the population in that area and the infrastructure.
Well, again, I don't think we're talking about 20 stories in any...
No, I don't either. That was kind of just an example,
Yeah.
to double from 10 to 20, give you an idea.
I think our highest is 120 feet. That's where you
Yeah.
live and he lives.
And I would say, when they first built them, being a longtime city resident, I went, oh my God, this is horrible. And yet, I look around and I look at the space, well, I look at New York, Manhattan, and I think, you know, it'd be nice to have more green spaces.
Yeah, but a certain amount of growth, and of course, it increases our tax base as
Yes.
well. And we have infrastructure here that we're not using.
Mhm.
The purification and sewer and so forth. So a certain amount of growth is always a good thing, frankly. Now, I'm not saying I don't want it to become Los Angeles or even Orlando, but,
Well, I think we're going to get growth whether we want it or not.
okay.
So,
You through, Member Diesel?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Member Stokel, I didn't ignore you that time, by the
I know.
way. Somebody else did.
This question's for the city manager in regards to wanting the workshop versus the presentation. Is this because were you thinking to get more citizen input rather than having staff present something? Are you looking for more citizen input for staff to then go present something?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Based on, and I wasn't here during the time, but there was a lot of polarization of the community over the height. So knowing that it's occurred back in 2006-07 timeframe, you're now 10 years later, 11 years down the road. So what is the feeling of the community now?
Okay.
And anticipation of everything that council said, growth's coming. So is it 50 feet or is it 120 feet that council would like to see? But the thought process on a workshop is so council had enough time to listen to citizens' concerns on both sides.
Before directing staff what
Yes,
to kind
yes,
of
ma'am.
look at? Okay. And that, I guess that's where, for efficiency purposes, I feel like a presentation, we would be able to have that, but I feel because this is such a hot item, having that workshop and really including the community, and it wasn't, oh, we just had it at one of our presentation meetings and it was voted on, and then, I don't know, I just think it's our way of doing our due diligence to really try to listen to the community and then direct staff, so that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Well, I think I'm hearing that the majority, at least, wants to have a workshop. Does anybody have adamant against it or would vote against it? So that's the consensus at this point. Do you need anything else?
No, sir, and just for your planning purposes, you know, we'll go into budget. Of course, you're in recess, the second meeting in June. I'm planning on bringing this before council sometime in August, just for your timing purposes.
Okay, thank you. Next item, 12C.
Yes, sir. On August 22nd, 2017, council approved resolution number 11, 2017, transitioning stormwater charges to the non-ad valorem tax roll. Staff is requesting direction on how to proceed with the upcoming billing cycle, including recommended rate increases and modifications to the ordinance to allow for annual approval by the city council of rates and to only notify individual property owners if the rate increase exceeds 3% in any given year. It's recommended that council approve advisability pertaining to non-ad valorem stormwater billing per staff's presentation, and Mr. Cook is here to provide a brief presentation on this.
Mr. Cook, go right ahead, sir.
All right. As the manager mentioned, we're looking for some input into this year's annual billing for stormwater. Just to give you a little rollback history, storm utility was established in 1990, originally a fee to all developed properties in the city. Originally came out as a quarterly standalone bill. In 2005, a 2.5% automated increase was added by ordinance. 2010, that bill transitioned to a January standalone bill, and 12 transitioned to the utility bill as part of the annually billed on the water bill. And current year, billed last year was the first year's non-ad valorem assessment. So we're looking at two primary actions that we're asking for some input on tonight. The first one is the proposed rate increase. We are proposing a 2.5%, which is our annual normal rate increase. For reference, that is also the CPI for the last year through April. It actually is 2.8 on the new one released today from May to May. We're proposing a 2.5. The second part, which is a little deviation from the written report, was that we're seeking input on how to adjust the individually increased notice. By statute, we give notice to all property owners of a rate increase. What we're looking to do is add language to that notice for this year that would allow us to, while seeking council's approval on an annual basis, as long as we are not exceeding the 12-month CPI difference, we would not be mailing out to individual property owners in that year. This is fairly consistent with other utilities that are under non-ad valorem right now. That just looking for a little cleaner way, there is about a $14,000 to $15,000 cost in that mailer every year to each individual improved property. So as we move forward to steps of approval, once we have some direction, we'll come back in July with the first reading of the ordinance change, and then in August we'll be looking at the second reading of the ordinance change and the rate resolution to establish the rates for this year's billing cycle that will be forwarded to the tax collector. Give you an idea of the summary of the fees. We do have a minor increase in property counts between 18 and 19, slightly up, and we've applied the new rates in the chart to the right. An individual single family that does not garner a credit would be seeing a $2.19 increase on their stormwater bill, part of their taxes. Take a look at the revenue with the increase in properties. We have an effective increase of 2.61% on revenue. So as we distribute that revenue to where it goes, as we look at our personnel costs running close to $1 million is up projected to be up about 2.5%. The operating a little less than $400,000 has dropped. We bought a mini excavator this year that allows us to drop a significant rental equipment out of our pool. For non-departmental, we're up substantial. We're looking to make another large equipment purchase next year. That excluding transfers up about 112%. The rate of return to the City of Titusville General Fund is down roughly 3%. That's based on the revenue collections. The transfer to solid waste to cover their share of the street sweepers is up slightly. And then we are putting in a fairly robust capital improvement plan with about an 81% increase to $1.45 million transfer to capital. So in particular, that capital, we're splitting up $550,000 will go to maintenance projects, pipelining, pipe replacement, a couple drainage improvements. The balance, or $900,000, will go to water quality improvements. When coupled with the grants we have, will total 5 additional baffle boxes being installed solely on the Indian River Lagoon Basin. Just to give you an idea of what we currently are working with, approved active projects, we have about 800,000 in maintenance, a little over 6 million in water quality currently active and closing out. Wanted to share with you the impact of those water quality in particular. You may know we work on 3 cycles of a BMAP, which is the Basin Area Plan. The city completed BMAP 1 already. We're in BMAP 2, and with these projects we have funded, although the deadline is 2023, we're at 60% of nitrogen and 95% of phosphorus already addressed for BMAP 2. So we're progressing at a highly accelerated rate on addressing BMAP 2 and then moving into 3 under the current proposals. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any input you have on both the rate increase and the methodology for billing or billing notices.
I'm going to start off. The idea of incremental financing has always, to me, been the best way to go. I don't think it's fair on our citizens to hit them with a 15 or 20% increase every so many years. It gives them no chance to acclimate to the pricing, and generally causes quite a stir. We're already doing that, of course, and it has worked well for us in that. So I really like the methodology, and there is a limit on it, right?
Yeah, the proposal we're talking about is putting into the notice to the citizens, we would not raise it above the CPI for the previous 12 months without going back to them and notifying them. So the council would have discretion for anything below that point on an annual basis.
Okay, I thought there was a limitation too, 15 or something.
No. Originally in the write-up, we contemplated going to a 3% fixed.
Yeah.
We felt the CPI would probably be a better one that actually will probably label below 3%, but since it's a measure of inflation, it would give a better measurement for what we're asking for.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Is there just a couple things? So one is there just stormwater standalone rate comparison from us compared to, take your pick of municipalities and county? I know that during presentation, we typically get it when earlier in the year, but is there a current standalone comparison?
Yeah, we rank about the 3rd highest behind both the county and Palm Bay.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you that most of the beachside communities have not done a study, and Melbourne's in the middle of a study, so they will all be coming up.
Okay.
But we can provide that. We do have that number.
That I would just like to see to make sure. And the reason I say that is that, and to the mayor's point, from the incremental financing, the methodology is sound. But the one thing I feel compelled to as a council member is to be able to go to the citizen and say, do you approve, yes or no? And at 51%, it's a yes, and below 51%, it's not. And where I feel comfortable is that our resources currently after the past hurricane showed the value of stormwater, right? And so to me, I think that there's, if nothing more than damages left over, and making sure that when the next hurricane rolls around, what we don't say is, God, we wish we would have had these resources available. I think we're too fresh off a bad series of hurricanes, and I'm praying another one not hit us this year. So I feel comfortable with going to the public to say, yes, it's an appropriate ask to the public. And I think they would support that. Again, also for the care to the lagoon as well. On our BMAP, we're substantially ahead of other communities. And when you look at the lagoon, there's a reason our part does not look like the other parts, I believe. So, and that is to the work of previous councils, to staff, and just engaging that plan. So I feel comfortable on an increase, but I have questions in comparison. And the only reason I say that is at some point, anytime you say tax increase, I think one of the thresholds you have to also be able to ask is, at what point is there relief to the taxpayer? And so I just want to make sure I can get opinion on that from the taxpayers.
Can I ask you, what do you mean by relief?
Well, where I feel comfortable in tax incremental financing, at some point, it makes logical sense, but at some point, there may be a consensus or group as taxpayers who go, it may be sound, but we're not paying one more dime. And so I at least want to afford people that opportunity for an argument.
You understand, most of most of the need comes in from inflation, which is always, that's what CPI is. And so there's always going to be a need there of some sort, and this is being geared to that. So it's pretty fair.
And I'm in agreement to that. The second part is that without notice above, or excuse me, below the CPI, I would prefer notice irregardless. And the rationale for that is, I think as a council member, that it's the moment that you say that there's a tax increase, notifying that, even if it's, I think is a good practice. So, and it just takes an assumption away, so.
And the intent would be, we would bring it back during budget hearings. It would still have rate resolutions. It would still be council items. What it wouldn't get is an individual mailer. That's the only difference in the two.
That's one of the most critical components to me.
Okay.
Member Stokel?
Piggybacking off that, do we know the cost of having to individually mail out notices?
Yeah, it cost about $14,000 last year. It'll be about $15,000 this year.
Okay, so that's kind of where I don't know. So I want to clarify this. It looks like you guys, the staff is wanting us to adjust the ordinance that would allow staff to raise the rate as long as it doesn't go higher than the CPI. If that were to happen, what is staff's plan? Is it to raise it 2.5% each year? What are we?
It would really be an annual.
Year by year?
Yeah, we would bring it back like we do the other utilities and ask for.
During the budget process?
Probably right before it.
Okay.
Because it will still have a non-ad valorem rate resolution that has to be adopted. We'd be doing that in August, so you'll
Okay.
probably see that in advance of. But I can't say what it would be next year because I really don't know what the cost increases are.
Is this similar to what we're doing with the water rates right now, where we're doing it incrementally? Are we having to mail out individual mailers each year when we raise it to 3%?
No, the other utilities are rate resolutions or ordinance changes. Solid waste
Similar to
does an
this,
ordinance rewrite.
what you're proposing?
Different method of collection because the other utilities are on the monthly water bill. Solid waste, water, sewer. This being that it's from a taxing agency, we're supplying them a rate resolution to set the rates to the individual property owners as a non-ad valorem assessment. But no, there won't be, the other utilities don't mail an individual.
But similar advertisement and notification to citizens?
Oh, yes, ma'am. They still get the budget hearings. They still have
Okay.
as part of your budget hearing, you'll adopt a resolution for solid waste, for instance, this year that will change the ordinance for the rates.
Okay, and then my last question was in regard to where, I think where the money goes. You mentioned baffle boxes. Is that coming from this, or is it coming from the lagoon tax?
Both.
Okay.
The lagoon tax pays $89 a pound for removal. So, for instance, South Street will have 3 baffle boxes for it. The recovery we take, we have to fund some of our own. We'll also apply for St. John's or DEP grants to assist too, but we already have allocated funds that you already approved for construction through the lagoon tax.
Okay.
Those funds don't cover the full 100% of construction.
Okay, that was gonna be my recommendation, to see if potentially we can get some more.
Yeah, all of our projects that relate to lagoon
Lagoon.
have gone in as substitutes. We have 2 more that'll go in December,
Okay.
substituting out more projects. So they've all had grant attachments to them. Matter of fact, the ones we're currently doing have DEP, legislative intent, and other grants attached to them. So we're only paying a portion of, but there's still, the utility's still paying some.
Okay, but if there's more lagoon money, I'd like us to try to go get that.
Yes, ma'am.
If
Yes, ma'am.
possible.
We have a plan to substitute 2 additionals.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Member Diesel?
Going to the how to inform them, and when you say seeking approval to adjust ordinance to make the individual increase notice to all property owners only required if the proposed increase is higher than CPI. What kind of numbers would that be, and what's the tradition? How many do we have that are above the CPI?
I mean, like this year, we're proposing the same break as CPI, but we could have come at 3%, which would have required the mailer under that provision. If we pick 2.5 and we come in at 2.75, we would send out a mailer notifying them that we're above what we're disclosing to them. CPI historically will run above 2, at least it has recent years. Probably likely may end this year closer to 3 or higher. So what we're looking to do is capture our rates at or below the inflation rate, and if we were to go above it, which would pop up if we were going to a heavier capital program, or if employee costs went up substantially, fuel goes up, to recapture those costs. So it could be in any year that we'd be looking to go above that CPI rate.
Okay, I'm really trying to weigh here the cost factor of the 14, 15,000 versus the over CPI.
Yeah, this is one of the, when we transferred the off of the water bill onto the ad valorem, this is something that we didn't realize we had to do to advertise for increases. So we think this is a reasonable method to go through the budget process through the same information to citizens, and then allow council to make any adjustments above CPI if necessary, which would generate a mail-out.
What does a mail-out cost?
$15,000.
15,000? That's a lot to be reckoned with. I have no more lights. What's your pleasure? I'm not hearing a lot. I think it's a good methodology, and I think even at those periods where they don't get, because it's the same as CPI, we're saving some money there, and I think that's always a good thing. I personally think that 2.5% is, pretty reasonable. It's not, I don't think anybody will, there'll always be somebody who doesn't want to pay a tax just because it's a tax, not how much it is. But I think that's, with the numbers that we're seeing on the other chart, that's not too bad, so. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I will. I move to approve advisability pertaining to non-ad valorem stormwater billing per staff's presentation.
Second.
Discussion.
I call that.
Sorry.
Discussion.
So as presented means no notification over CPI and the 2.5. I'll just share with you, I'm not comfortable on the no notification. I think the assumption is there, and don't get me wrong, 15 grand is a lot of money. What's the total amount of revenues that we receive based off of stormwater?
2.62 million.
Right, so for 15,000 split for I'll just round it 2.6 million. To me, that amount of money for people that get surprised by an increase, and they may know it or may not, but to me, I think it's good to every person you're asking to pay to say, here's how much we're expecting you to pay next year, which then gives them an opportunity to voice opinion.
But you got to remember, they're not getting hit with 2.5 million. Now, how much does it cost the average house?
Households below 90, most of them get a 25% credit on that as well.
So at 2.5%, how much is that? How much it costs? $90?
Yeah, $90 roughly.
a year?
Yep.
I believe your question, sir, is what is a 2.5% increase? It is about $2.
Oh, sorry. Yep, $2.19 is the
Per-
single family
Per month there? Is that what
per
you're
year.
That's annual, sir.
Right.
$2.50?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's not really that much money. It's not even a cup of coffee.
I totally get it. It's a fundamental, and that's one of those I can agree to disagree on it. Fundamentally, I say if you are going to ask for a tax increase, more notification the better, but that's me.
Member Nelson.
I tend to agree with Vice Mayor, and I don't know if there's a way we can put it on a utility bill, just a notice, basically. I would feel better if there was some way that people knew this was coming up. I understand it's not a lot of money, but for some people who are on limited income, it is going to impact them. Maybe not a lot.
$2.50 a year?
$2 a year. I mean, I would just feel better if.
Yeah, you'd feel better. I understand.
If-
Both you
if
and
they-
the Vice Mayor
yeah.
would feel better if everybody knew about it.
Right.
And I can understand that. Is there a way to do that without a separate mailing? or-
Well, if we're noticing the non-ad valorem, there's a very specific way it has to be noticed. And we can bring a sample in the next one. There's a statute that you have to lay out the way it is, what it says, specific language for the assessment. If we're going with changing the language to allow it below CPI and you're looking to add an additional notice to a water bill, we can look at that. That's really up to council, but I don't think that you can't really notice an assessment on the water bill.
Right, I think what Kevin's saying is won't be no notice, it just won't be the elevated direct mailing to each individual required because it's non-ad valorem assessment now. They'd get the similar notices they had in years past. It just won't be required to have that elevated $15,000 cost of mailing it directly to each person, which has never happened before except for last year.
Yeah.
It'll be the similar notice they've had in the past.
But it will be a
But that's-
notice on their water bill.
No, what I'm saying is if the council desires us to look at enhanced noticing without doing the statutory level noticing, if it's just you're looking at us to notice a rate hearing or a utility billing conversation, we can work with the city manager and talk about
Right.
how we can look at
Because
that.
it's on the tax roll now, the statute requires when you raise it, because it's non-ad valorem assessment now, this increased notice, which is a direct mail to each customer, each citizen that's being hit, because it's
Right.
now on the tax roll. That's the
Right.
statutory process if you're going to raise it, because we've gone that path now. By including in an ordinance that you're authorized to raise it not to exceed CPI, then if you do raise it that level, not to exceed CPI, then the notice provided would be similar to the notices we've done prior to having it on the non-ad valorem tax roll through the budget process.
Okay.
But now, if you don't change that language, each time there's a raise, you will every year do the direct mailing,
Okay.
every time there's an increase. If it's not an increase, you're not going to do any additional notice. That's only required with an increase.
Okay, I'm
What
happy.
you said.
Yeah, so
Would you like to add that to the motion?
yes, I want to keep my motion with the additional amendment of ensuring that staff still sends out notice to the customers.
Does the second hold? Second holds. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in,
I do have questions.
well, go ahead.
Thank you. So and just make sure I'm getting this right. Every year, somebody prior to an increase taking place is in their hand going to receive something that says increase coming,
Yeah,
as the language is defined by her.
Yeah, I think and to clarify, what we're talking about is changing our ordinance to allow the utility to increase rates below CPI at council's approval. And what the council has asked for is us to look at enhanced notice on the water bill of that hearing, or whatever that is.
Let me, I don't,
So we're
I
still
don't want,
doing a
I'm not
notice
trying to
for the
speak
change in
around.
methodology. Yep.
I.
You still have a water
What
bill.
I'm
with
hearing,
a-
what I'm hearing, and that's what I'm saying, I just want to make sure I'm hearing right. So what I think I'm hearing is there's a proposed increase. What I want to make sure is that someplace, somebody is getting something that says, it went up, or it's going up.
That's what the word increase means.
Well,
Yeah, and the way I'm hearing that, and Richard, help me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
is that although you're supportive of the ordinance change allowing to go away from the statutory notice, which would be an individual mailer with a lot of extra information.
Right.
You're amenable to an individual water bill notice, per se, that would have a bottom similar to what was done for, I think, the cooling towers recently. That would say proposed stormwater rate
Yes.
increase of X%, however
Yes.
that is.
Yes.
So although that's understood that the ordinance will be okay with that being a council level approval without the statutory notice.
Right.
We'd be, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to call the question. If there isn't any further discussion, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Next item is 12C.
Yes, sir. 12C, during the May 22nd, 2018 City Council meeting, Council directed staff to prepare a memorandum regarding ways in which the city could address issues of sustainability, the ability to utilize the Titusville Environmental Commission Board for sustainability issues, and ways to ensure that sustainability issues will be analyzed by individuals that have certain expertise or knowledge in the field. The attached memorandum provides the current powers and duties of the TEC, criteria for the board membership, and explores options available to council to address sustainability issues within the city. Staff's recommending that council discuss the issue of sustainability, the options available to council to address sustainability through the TEC, and provide direction to staff.
Okay, just lost my place entirely. Okay, what does council have to say? Member Nelson, you're first.
I've given this some thought, and I really would hate to see a separate sustainability board or committee. I would like to see the TEC take on some of those duties of a sustainability board. And I'd also like to see at least some of the members, can't talk anymore, having some type of scientific knowledge or expertise in this area. I think we would end up with some really great ideas on things we can do in our city to make sure that our city grows, develops, and is environmentally friendly. I understand that there are people that are on the board that have an interest in environmental ideas, and they want to be part of it. I mean, I'm interested in it, but I look at it and go, you know, if it was between me being on the board and two people standing next to me that was an environmental engineer and somebody with a marine sciences degree, you guys would be much more useful, beneficial to the city. So I would like to see us at least limit or require that some of the members have some type of scientific background.
I agree with you. Is it possible that in our advertising that we could say something to the effect special for the TEC?
Sir, you'll have to define what each membership qualifications, what you want for each member. And then once that's defined, we would advertise that criteria.
Yeah, we do that.
We do?
Yeah, on the
But right now, I think what Member Nelson's saying is the current board makeup and composition doesn't have some of the skill sets that she desires.
I agree, but are you proposing that we let people go from the existing thing?
I'm not saying let people go, but I'm saying as people drop out or resign from the board, that we should be looking at replacing those people with people who have the expertise. Right now, there's no requirement that members of the TEC possess any special training, education, or expertise in environmental issues. I think it's very important that we have those people there to guide us.
I agree, and what I'm proposing and what the city manager said is to put that in the advertising for when people drop out, that we're going to give a special consideration for people with these defined eligibilities. Is that correct, city manager, that you'll be able to
We'll need to adjust the ordinance for
Correct.
the
If you want to
TEC
advertise-
qualification.
Yeah, if you want to advertise that members are required to have expertise, then the ordinance would need to require that.
So my suggestion would be you have 7 members. I would suggest that 4 members have some type of background in environmental sciences, engineering, science type of backgrounds, as opposed to just someone off the street. So that would, at least you have some individuals in there that had that educational background that can help us out and help the staff out.
I think we're agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I know I am.
Okay.
And just to clarify, if we adjust the ordinance with these qualifications, we'll grandfather the current board in until they depart.
Right, I think it'd be effective with the next appointment.
Yeah, exactly.
So whenever members come up for renewal, you could judge it versus that criteria. And it's a 7-member board. If you require 4 with expertise and you don't have any residents that have that expertise, you may be up in a position where you only have non-residents, so your whole board, majority of your board could be non-residents, and that could be an issue for you. So you might want to consider less than 4, you know.
We can define that as well, though, right? I mean,
We could say,
You can find how many, what type of
Yeah.
expertise you're looking for.
Yeah.
That's entirely.
yeah, well, that's what we're proposing, I think, but let me hear from everybody else. Member Stokel?
I'm kind of on the fence with this one, just because I feel like if, that's kind of when they come before us, and if we have multiple applicants, then at that point, we make that decision, you know, this one has more experience, or this one, I don't know how I feel about excluding someone that may not necessarily have that background, but has interest in it now, or knows certain people. I just don't know if it's necessary, because if, like I said, I feel if we have 2 people that are competing, and we as a board feel like the person with more experience, then we can make that decision at that point. It's kind of where I'm
Well,
at.
that's kind of what I meant by saying we will give special
Preference.
consideration. That's still our decision on it, and when you go in for a job, one of the things they look at is what's your capabilities, or what's your education, or what area are you trained in, so.
But
when you
still,
send it-
people can still apply that may not have it, and then at that point, you decide not to select them, and I think that's what we can do.
No, we're not saying that. We're saying if we have 2 people and one person has all the education in it, then we would give that person special attention, certainly.
Right.
But if there's 2 people and neither one of them has it, we've got to pick one to fill that gap.
so basically saying,
When they come, we can take them.
there's 7 people on board and saying, maybe this, I think I understand.
Thanks.
I think I understand. There are 7 people on the board, we're going to pick out 7 members. Special preference will be given to those who have a
So we're just,
science background.
okay, so just adding optional criteria that kind of helps guide us, not necessarily a requirement. That, okay.
And then the other thing I would suggest is that we add some of the sustainability criteria to the TEC's duties, which would be identify and recommend affordable strategies associated with conservation, renewable energy, and energy efficiency.
Yep, no, I agree with that.
Provide recommendations to the city council on incentives for city residents, businesses, developers, and organizations to practice environmental conservation and sustainable building practices.
You have the floor.
Oh, I'm pretty much, and the only other thing I did want to add is, as I think we're trying to grow this board and kind of move it into a more sustainability focus, I do want to say, like, if we get people that are interested in this and may not qualify, or I know I have a friend that hasn't lived here for a year yet, so they're not eligible, they can still go to the meetings and provide input, and I really want to try to encourage that, even if they're not necessarily a board member, that they have value as well.
Sure, and then when something comes up, they're already there. But we can go outside of the city limits. We do it on the Heritage Board, and years ago it was done on the Titusville Housing Authority. Is that correct, City Attorney?
Specific to that board, I can tell you that the city code specifically states members of your boards and committees shall be residents of the city of Titusville. Now, a couple of boards such as TEC, council has, gone away from that a little bit, but still, as you see in here, that to be eligible for appointment, each member must be a registered voter and resident of the city of Titusville for a period of 1 year prior to appointment, period. So the intent is always that your board be made up of your residents. But it says to the extent you're unable to do that, they've opened it up to District 1 specifically for those individuals who have an expertise.
That's what we have on the Heritage Board, or whatever we're calling it.
Right, I think the Historic Preservation might
That's
to allow experts.
That's the lowest requirement, though. That's, you have to be here 1 year and vote.
That is the goal and intent of the code, and is to have residents that have been here for at least a year to serve on your boards and committees. That's correct. That's the intent. However, like I said, did recognize, and maybe it's because the inability to be able to get 7 people that had an interest in environment, to recognize we could open it up to District 1.
I don't think we're talking about 7 people. I mean, that would be unusual if we could.
No, I'm just saying that's how many you have on that board.
Yeah. But
And I don't know that you necessarily need to play with the language to have a preference. If you have 2 applicants for TEC and one has no interest as a resident and one has interest, obviously you have the discretion to pick the individual with an interest in TEC or education or expertise. You don't have to have the code tell you that, to do that.
But
You have that
we seem
discretion.
to be getting away from the point. The point is we're trying to attract people with certain education so that they can, that board will have some leadership in those areas that are educated in it. So that's the purpose of what your motion was, right?
Right,
That
that's what
was
Member
really-
Nelson said. If we get an applicant that has a demonstrated interest or expertise, your council has discretion and they're shown a desire to appoint that individual over somebody who does not.
But I think when you advertise it, it would be good to say, be able to say, we are looking for people for the TEC. Preference would be given to this type of applicant.
Correct. As you stated before, you could add a sentence to this code that says it's council's desire to appoint members that have a special expertise or
Correct.
interest. We could certainly, I'm just saying you're not required to do that to exercise your discretion.
Oh.
But to the extent you want to advertise it that way, then yes, we can come back to you with a code change that acknowledges that is your preference in appointment.
Special attention would be good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would like to see it done like that
Sure.
because we are trying to attract those kind of people.
Yeah.
And I think if they see it, it's not, it just adds a special oomph to it, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I'm not. Sarah's laughing at me.
No. We can certainly do that, and we could also identify some sustainability types of issues in the code. And I apologize, you were going through some of those. I think you were looking at some of the alternatives under number 2 for sustainability issues that you thought would be appropriate. And I didn't get them. I wasn't sure which ones you had
I was
identified.
looking at the first and second one. Because you were looking in incentives and affordable strategies associated with conservation.
You want to do that, and we can let some of the other,
Okay.
you still have the floor. Okay. Vice Mayor.
So here's what I would like to see, and then here are some steps I think that I would like to see in order to get there. So one is that I would like to see a board that is reviewing, creating, and engaging environmental policy for a recommendation to council. And my intent would be that that policy, where they're pulling that policy, would come from one of 2 places. One, that they've defined as a body. So they have figured out something that the city's missing, and they are sending that up to city council for recommendation, similar to that of planning and zoning. The second would be inversely, where policy as derived from city council could then be given for review, implementation, and from policy corrections, they would be able to look at what city council has said, this is where we want to go. They would have a chance to review that and see recommendations coming back as well. So that working of defining priorities both ways, and then implementation of that from another set of, what I would hope to get is experts in their field. So from the criteria that a member would have, my hope would be that we would define the criteria similar to that of what we do with, I use Board of Adjustments and Appeals. We have multiple members to that board, but there's also at-large members, so not everybody has to be the water scientist. There can just be somebody who's passionate about it. There's still room for that because we need that. But my hope would be, I would also I would shrink the board to 5 members, and that would just be for continuity, and bring in alternate members. They're welcome to join the meeting, they're welcome to be a part of it, but I think with 5, you can get it done.
Why not have 7?
I
I don't know what you mean by continuity.
Well, I think we have gotten less done. And I don't know if that's out of lack of, I don't know if that's lack of direction from council. I don't know if it's effective governance from that board itself. I think that we've gotten some nice things done, but I can't honestly say, and it's not to a fault, it's just, I just haven't seen what I would consider a tremendous amount of engagement from driving policy to council.
There may be a lot of reasons for that.
I totally agree.
But I don't see how the number of people, it depends on the people that are in the number, not the number that's in
Sure.
the group.
Yeah, but mine would be yes to having some outline criteria for some of the members, but inclusive of an at-large member, so people can be a part of that, and just that engagement that they are there for policy. And the third step, my apologies, would be that if there has been an adopted, as an example, a sustainability plan, that the role of the environmental board would be the continued oversight of policy to that plan. So I would my hope would be to put that in their court.
The only thing I want to make sure of is that the council is responsible for everything. We are elected to serve the people. I don't want somebody that isn't elected to serve the entire city in a position to override the county in any way, the city in any way, rather. I've seen that happen, and it can be pretty ugly. So while we might give them suggestions that they say, we like this, we don't like that, and that's fine. They might give us suggestions, and we have the choice when it goes out. We could say we like this, we don't like that. But if they give us suggestions and we don't like something, the council I'm talking about, then ours is the final judge on it, right?
Totally agree. Similar to planning and zoning.
Yeah. Okay. Who else do we have? Member Diesel.
Hey, he's
How are
here.
you? Haven't
Hi,
heard
good to
from
see you
in a
guys.
while.
So going way back to the beginning of this discussion, so you don't forget, let's run it back on TV. We're talking about, we want 4 people to know science and this, that, and the other. I don't think that we have to get, and Sarah came in, and Member Stokel came in and noted that we kind of have that application process. And so I'm not sure why we're going to say we want this or we want that. Like any other job application, or job ad, we describe what we want. So that's what we do. We describe what we want, and there's a job ad. That's the committee. And like any other job application, we pick the most qualified. So I think when we start saying we want 4 of these and 3 of these, or we want to cut down to 5 or whatever, I think we're maybe a little paralysis with analysis. Let's simply get the job ad out there and find the most qualified people. And to add to that, from something that was said at the last meeting, in case it comes that way, I'm not in favor of going outside of our city to get people on the committees. Now, you can get all the advisors outside of the city, and they can come on, sort of like I am with the Parks and Rec Board. I am a liaison. I don't get to vote, but I can give them all the input and the expertise that I have on my area. But I would want to stay inside my city, and the rest, I think, is as I stated it.
Two things, if I may. One is what we're talking about putting out there, so we're advertising for a certain, so they know they're out there looking at it, or somebody says, don't you have that education? They're looking for it. It's an advertising thing.
That's what I said. Advertise what we want.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just heard earlier, when we need at least 4 of those, and we need 3 of those. I'm saying advertise what we want, and then grandfather the people who are in now, stay there. And as they go out, we should be able to make it more environmental specific with our ad. And maybe we're not doing that now, I'm not exactly sure, but I think that any board we have, we should advertise what we're looking for. And then when we come up here, hopefully we'll have more than one, because that's been the frame lately. But we are the guys who do the, bring them on or no.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe we need to just say, no, we need to try this again. Re-advertise, as we say.
Yeah, but as long as we have the concept of why we're putting those requirements in or suggesting that we will give them special consideration is to attract the type of people that we are looking for to do this sustainability thing. And as far as outside the city, it was limited. I don't know how we did it on the Heritage Board, but the one I'm talking about, Housing Authority, was limited to North Brevard. It's not like we're getting people from Orlando or anything. And many of the people, I was one of them, lived just outside the city limit. So we're very much a part of the community, had business in the community and everything else, but we were not eligible. And the former city attorney made a judgment that it could be extended to just outside the city limits to a degree.
Well, I could hear more on that, but I'd kind of rather have somebody outside the city limits, again, do what I do with the Parks and Rec Board, and that is, I have my say. I sit on the board, but I don't have a vote on the board. And I would say that, you know, to bring it closer to home, I wouldn't want somebody to run for city council just outside the city limits. And I know that that's an extreme example perhaps, but I just think we need to kind of stay inside the city for our committees.
Okay. We may be limited, though, on the people that we're going to get on it, but okay, we'll see what goes on. Member Nelson, you're back.
I'm back. I don't have a problem with us leaving it at the 7 people. I think that if you get the right people on that board, you're going to have a totally different result. I did introduce 2 people a couple weeks ago to each other. They didn't know each other. They both expressed an interest in this board. I will tell you, they talked my ear, well, I didn't get a word in edgewise, and they talked for 20 minutes, and I left, about things that they could do within the city to help us out. They were having a great time. They could have talked probably all night. I don't know if they did or not. I left. But I'm hoping that we can get those kind of people on this board that have that passion and that knowledge that can help us build the future.
But you let them know that we were looking for that, otherwise they wouldn't have known. And they
Yes,
wouldn't have
I
talked
did.
together and so forth. And so
I
forth.
did. I
But
let them know.
What I'm saying is you were advertising, and that's what
I was
Lisa said,
advertising.
and I said, that if you want them, you got to go put something out and say, we want you.
Yeah. So,
Okay, where are we? We've had our discussion, and I think you've heard the general consensus. Does that give you enough, or we got to vote on every bit of it?
One thing I heard is not interested in changing number of members. We'd like to advertise and put out there that we are looking for people with
Will be given.
knowledge, interest, expertise in environmental issues. We certainly can
Well-
add that to the code, that the preference will be given, and we'll advertise it that way.
But environmental and
Sustainability.
be more specific of sustainability, which is.
That's correct, and we can certainly add that language I discussed earlier to the code, that we will consider and give preference to that. We'll advertise it that way.
Yeah.
The other thing I heard is potentially an interest in adding sustainability issues along with their duties to the code. So we could clarify that that's something that this, council's interested in hearing, not only water and environmental, but actually some focus on some sustainability issues.
Correct. Everybody in
So
agreement with that?
that's what I've heard so far. I do want to point out that, currently, when you're looking at your TEC, their job is to study any environmental, water, and of course, we can add sustainability issues of interest or concern to them and report that to you. So they're not required to wait for your direction. that they have that ability to study issues and present them to you for your consideration. Also, of course, council can dictate to them studies that you wish them to consider and come back to you. They already have the ability to make recommendations to your Planning and Zoning Commission and to council regarding your comprehensive plan, your policies. So your code currently contemplates that they will do that. But of course, also reminds everybody that council's in control and you ultimately just make the decision. But currently, the code does suggest and require that they look at these issues on their own, as well as any issues that you provide to them. So I certainly can come back to a code that discusses the interest of sustainability for members and that you're interested in those members to have those qualities, and you'll provide that preference, and discuss the sustainability duties.
Everybody in agreement with that? Any problems? We have a consensus, and your list is very good. Next item is petitions and requests from the public present. Do we have anybody who would like to speak? Name and address.
Heather Summy, live in Titusville. Long time no see, everybody.
Hi.
I just had a couple things from just observing for today is, one, what you just spoke of, my view is North Brevard. I agree with that because I know a lot of friends who just live right on the outskirts of MIMS because their fences butt up to that and they still work in Titusville, and people in Port St. John, they identify with Titusville, but they just happen to buy a house in Port St. John, which is not considered in the city. That's just my input, and that would expand your base for applicants that some people who are more in rural areas may be more environmentally educated in their own way, because that's why they bought a house with most acres, because they are environmentally friendly, and that's where they chose. So that's just an idea. I know you guys, that's just my input. And earlier tonight with the lady with the nursery situation, and I know that we've all had bad days, we've all given out false information in our everyday lives, in our past and everything, so I understand how that can be, everybody has that situation. Is there a way that that there could be an audit on the workflow that is given to people? Is there, like if someone comes in for what she came in for, is there a workflow that says, okay, this is what, like a checklist, this is what she has, this is what, you know, she's asking for to help minimize the misinformation that she was given, or the sidebar that happened where she's at in the predicament that she is right now? Is there an audit of a workflow that you could go back and say, yep, that's exactly what we did and that was correct?
You mean tell them to tell the truth?
No, but there's a workflow for, let's say I just applied brand new to that job, and like, I'm not gonna know a lot of this. Is there a book or an audit that says, okay, when, I know you can't account for every single situation, don't get me wrong, because I write checklists and
Not that
training
I-
documents for a living.
Yeah, but not that I've ever heard of. This is a whole different situation from a job or anything else. That's members of the public
Right,
that are coming in and speaking to their elected officials.
right.
We can't make special requirements of really any kind of them. They are members, if they are members of the public, and we accept to talk, we can't say we'll only take people that have good, I don't know, hygiene or whatever.
No, and that, maybe I'm not speaking correctly. Like, when you go into that office and you're applying for a nursery license or whatever, is there a checklist for that scenario, or a general checklist for, you know, like a to-do list? Just like when you start a business. You know, I've started my own business, and if I would have known that, I would have not spent the extra money on this, because if I should have done an LLC, not a sole proprietor, you know, like, when you start a business, there's somewhat of a checklist. It's not, you know, I didn't know if that department has something like that.
I'm not sure who you're trying to qualify, though. You seem to be, what I'm talking about is people who come in. The only restrictions, actually, there's only there isn't actually any restrictions other than they give their name and address.
No, I'm talking about the actual office.
Like
Oh, for staff, okay.
Yeah,
I
for
didn't get
whatever
that
office
far.
she went into, that she was, you know, given instructions on how to perceive her situation. That office, not here, not the council, I'm talking about where it stemmed from, what got her here was.
I don't know. I'm going to ask the
It was
city
just a
manager.
thought. It's just a thought.
Yes, sir. I believe Ms. Bisaka described during the discussion what had occurred, to which she did meet with the applicant.
We have about 100 different types of BTRs.
Okay.
If the question was asked, has there ever been a BTR on that site for a nursery, the answer was yes.
And BTR, please explain.
Business tax receipt, you
Okay.
think of it as an occupational license.
Okay.
The answer was yes.
Okay.
If that's the only answer she got, if that's the only question she asked, that was the answer she got,
Right.
she would have said, oh, well, if you can do it, I can do it. If the question she asked was, is the zoning correct, the answer was no. So while checklists, we have a lot of them,
Right.
and we have a very formalized process for doing things, but a lot of it depends on the question a person asks. And frequently, people don't know the question to ask.
Right, and that's where.
And we can guess what their question is.
Right.
But we can't always get what they want because they don't know what to ask. So we do our best because frankly, all of us would rather solve the problem earlier than later.
I agree.
And that's why we have processes and we do have lists and this is all computerized and you talk to these people and the woman who picks up the phone says you need to talk to a zoner first thing.
Right.
So, but you don't always enter the process there.
Right.
That's the problem, is people don't always come in the top of the process. Sometimes they come in.
Yeah, because they don't know where to start. When you don't know
Correct.
something, you don't know where to start.
Right, and we've even gone so far as to go to realtors and say, let us tell you how the process works so they can help their people. But we still get the person who's bought the property before they find out that they can't do what they want to do.
And in her case, she didn't buy the property, so she didn't know that process
Right.
that you would have already explained to her.
We had a realtor come in who did not know that he had to look at zoning, thought all he had to do was look at the property appraiser's database. A person bought the property, the realtor did not know that.
Right.
So I can't help that, but
Right.
what your point is well taken, and we do have processes, but you have to come in at the top of the process, not in the middle.
It's almost like, I wish I would have known.
Yes, ma'am, and believe
Yeah.
me, we wish everybody would know.
Right.
That's why we do all these outreach, because we want people to know, but not everybody even knows to do that much.
I know you can't catch everything. Like I said, I've been around a while to know that you can't catch everything. I was just trying to just have a suggestion of is there a checklist? And I didn't know, that's why I asked.
Yeah, there is. Thanks.
No, we appreciate it. And we
Absolutely.
take it in the form that you gave it to us, being constructive, so thank you.
And just for councils, as you know, we have a Lean Six Sigma process improvement too, so when we identify areas that need examined, we certainly do that. We have 72 green belts now on staff, and we have 36 ongoing projects for process improvement. So when things are identified as shortcomings, we want to improve our processes and become the most efficient that we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have, one second, please.
Mr. Usaga, I'm sorry. Yeah, because what I was hearing was, I think, more of a question about could we, from a suggestion. So, I'm oversimplifying it. So, I know that there are a billion different businesses, each one. In my mind, what I'm envisioning is, here's your one-sheeter hot dog stand. Here's all the check marks you need for a hot dog stand. And that's what I am thinking for. So I would love to follow up with you at a different time to learn more about that.
Good, because this is a challenging process, and that's why there's more than one staff member, because nobody knows it all. And we know that the public doesn't either.
Thank you.
Depends on where you want to put your hot dogs.
Can I ask one more question, Mayor? Can I ask one more? It's on this topic.
Oh, on that.
I just actually wanted to second that and see, would it be possible to have that during a presentation meeting for all of us to kind of go over that checklist process to learn more about it?
Sure, we can bore you to tears.
It would just be helpful, and if citizens want to come and see, I know we did, I want to say maybe last year, we had the Lean Six Sigma talking about where it goes in the process, but I'd be interested in that initial contact, and any potential checklists, so we can kind of help better educate too. All right, thanks.
Anybody else before we have the honor this evening of having our District 1 County Commissioner
Thank you
with
all.
us.
Honored
She
to
has
be
been here all evening.
Yeah, and
which
talking
we're-
about the hot dog stand, I was thinking that would be good timing for y'all. You must be hungry, everybody but Sarah. I'm waiting for her to pull out tacos and all kinds of things over there. I actually took a video of her eating and sent it to her.
Tell the
I'm
truth,
sorry,
did it bring back old times tonight?
It did. You know, you guys look a lot taller in real life, so I tell you that. And you look good on camera too, but you're awfully beautiful in person. And I do want to thank you for serving and taking the time to do what you're doing. You're doing a great job. You're wonderful people. And it's easy to have opinions, but making policies a whole nother level. And I really appreciate it, and you really are doing a good job, and I thank you. And I do cherish each of you and your friendships that we've developed over the last couple years, and I'm just thankful we're all doing this together. So I thought I'd bring you a couple little bits of information that I thought was real good news, and some things that have happened on the county level that's, of course, affecting us, is what we do. But something in perspective, I moved here in the 60s. I won't tell you what year. But I remember that time Titusville in this area was the growing area. You know, Orlando didn't have Disney yet, so this was the hot spot. You know, the Space Center was coming in, all the military, and this was the growing community. It was the malls and the housing. And you know what? We're back. We're at that place again. And I got the privilege recently to get to go to the Pentagon with a bunch of really smart people. They let me hang out and go with them. And we got to meet with the Secretary of the Air Force. And she came in, and it was amazing. She had a conversation with us. And here's their phrase that they're using right now, military level. Space is a war-fighting domain. And on all that note, the government is focusing a lot of funding and a lot of their budget to military space. And they're bringing it here, guys. So they're saying, you know, if y'all would please get the housing ready, get the ability ready to have the licensing, being able to transfer for the spouses, we're coming. And then we met with SpaceX, and the guy who works with Elon Musk, he stood up and said, please build housing. Every time we go, I have to stay in the same place with my boss. So they're begging for us to build these types of hotels and these areas where they can come and they're able to watch this. But greater than that is they're transferring the workforce here, and we're after the family growth. And you know, that's a lot of the millennials, and they don't necessarily want houses, which I don't get it. My kids don't want to buy houses. They want to live in apartments, but that's what they're looking at. So I think we need to stay on top of this and keep focused. Because guys, we're doing it. It's here and it's coming, and I'm so proud of everything we're doing, and we're doing good growth. You had a couple good conversations. I kind of like going up a little bit more than out myself right now. So that's just my citizen opinion. On Brevard County, we keep track of this. We had I think it was a 3% North Brevard County growth. North Brevard had 7% growth. Wow. So we're doing something good. Tourism in Brevard County grew 7%. Orlando grew 0 this year. They stayed flat. A lot of that has the connection with the USSSA and what they've brought into the Vieira area and the overspilling tourists staying here. So our hotels are going to start filling up from things going on there, and hopefully we're going to find a way to sneak some of that youth activity up here also. But I just want to come and encourage you guys. You're doing so great. I love that you're pro-growth. I love that you have great positive attitudes. I love that you're getting all of the mean phone calls on the water rates. And I appreciate everything you're doing, and I just love you guys and miss you. And by the way, Miss Pasaka, she told me I need to get a life.
Miss Pasaka.
Yeah. I watch you guys on TV when you're on all the time, but she walked over to me tonight, she goes, you really need to get a life.
I think I told you the same thing, though, so don't worry, I understand.
Yeah, but thank you, guys.
Well, let me say, right, as I say, right back at you. We all, and I think I know I speak for everybody up here. We appreciate you. We appreciate what you do and your service to North Brevard, and we're sure glad you're there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's my honor. Thank you.
And also your staff.
Oh,
Marcia.
she's the best.
Hi, Marcia. Okay, anybody else like to speak? I don't see anybody. And, okay, we're on, where the heck are we here? The mayor's report, you have my report written. Is there anybody from council that would like to give any kind of report this afternoon, this evening?
No, I pushed the wrong button too.
Yeah, but you still beat me.
City manager. Oh, I'm sorry, did you? Oh, okay. Oh, look, there's a bunch of them.
We're all lit up, except we lit the wrong button.
Mayor, you could start at one end and just go down the row.
No, I'm going by numbers. Vice
Oh.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Somebody yelled at.
At the conclusion of one of our previous meetings, we had made mention of mental health services and care and how that looks like in the future. The direction from council that I took from that was see what's out there and then bring it back. And so I'm doing that right now. I'll share with you, in conjunction of our efforts, I got a phone call from members of DCF, and there were two individuals that I met with. One is Mr. Dayuto, who's the Regional Managing Director for Circuits 5, 9, 10, and 18. So Central Florida Plus. He is the director for DCF as a whole. The second was Ms. Shivani, who is the regional director for substance abuse and mental health. So when we talk about delivery of services throughout the entirety of Central Florida, these are the two who are responsible for the administration of that. Being said, they were highly interested, just that as a municipality, we even had a dialogue on that. And one of the opportunities that they have in their year was because of Governor Scott's mandate. He said, we're going to figure out mental health. And because of that, he directed policy administratively for DCF to come up with some ideas, short version. And part of that in their mandate from the governor were specific agencies that they had to meet, governmental agencies that they had to meet, of which there were numerous, but there were no municipalities inclusive of that. One of the opportunities that Mr. Dayuto saw was an invitation as a municipality to be engaged in that discussion. There's going to be 3 discussions that they're going to have before they bring that back to the governor. And so they offered, if the city of Titusville would want to be a part of that discussion, that they would invite us as a municipality. Being said, my hope would be that council would be amenable to that, just to being a part of that. I consider that kind of an honor to be a part of that. The second part is, at the end of the day, Ms. Franklin or Ms. Pusaka, a staff member who, Ms. Franklin at the Harry T. Moore Center, she really, that's her wheelhouse. And at the end of the day, whatever comes out of it, she has, decades of experience in it. So my hope would be, if city manager would think it prudent, would be to send her in our stead as part of that discussion, because I think it would be appropriate. But I would defer to council. I really thought that was an honor, to be asked. So it's up to council.
I agree.
So
Okay with you?
Certainly send a staff, but if council wants to participate, they could be on her wing if it's I don't know what the invite would be.
If council would be okay with it, I would appreciate the opportunity to go. And I would thank you for that. It's something that over the next few months, I really would hope to be involved with that. So beyond that, but anyway, that's fortuitous timing, and I appreciate council's just dive into that. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Nelson.
I see on your list that you spent some time with the Aviation Charter School?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
we both
showed
did.
them around, right? Yeah.
We both
Yeah,
did.
we had,
We
city
split them.
manager and I had, yeah.
We split them up that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I was just going to let the others know, they have applied for licenses, they are applying for grants, and they are proceeding.
You want to explain to them what they are and what they do, just briefly?
The Aviation Charter School would put in a charter high school, 9th through 12th grade. It would focus on aviation and technology. The goal, or their goal, is to have it up and running within the next, what would you say, 15 months? They are backed by several of the space companies, and the space companies have actually set up a corporation to administer.
What they would be doing is training our people to work in the space industry, and they do this elsewhere, and they're very successful in it. And believe it or not, they're not even asking us for money.
Yes. And I talked to the lady who's spearheading the effort. This will be her 40th charter school.
So it's
So, yeah, they
well,
have
well
number.
planned out, and a lot of experience, and we had several people also visit with them, or a couple of people. In addition to who's already been mentioned, that was the mayor of Kissimmee came over because they put one over there, and he came to speak there to their ability to get things done. And then there was Representative Asensio from
Miami,
who came all the way up with them as well to say, you guys are at the heart of things. He wants to make sure that the rest of the state is doing what they're doing down there, and that's creating jobs in Florida.
he'd love to have them.
Creating, filling the jobs in Florida, which makes the companies come to Florida.
Correct.
So, and we have a big edge on it because of our history. So very encouraging, very exciting. And, certainly.
Yeah.
And this is, remember diesel is maybe in your wheelhouse as well. Thank you. So and I think it's a school board related issue is where the answer would be. My concern, though, is tax dollars. How do we, to the best of our ability, tax dollars that have been collected and defined for the area to stay in the area? And specifically what I mean, and this is the PICO dollars, so the public education capital outlay dollars, right? So those dollars this past year, traditionally a school board would collect dollars, and some of those dollars could only be used for capital outlay, traditionally buildings, things like that.
Right.
And so we as a community have been the recipient of those dollars, and those buildings aren't going anywhere. But in this past year, the state legislator afforded those dollars to be used for charter school capital outlay. So one of the questions that I have is, how do we, or is it wherewithal to the best of our ability to make sure that those capital outlay dollars that are intended for use don't get moved somewhere else? And I believe that would impact our community if they were. And I think that's probably a question for our member Belford, but the impact of that would be to our community. And I think it could change the structure of what our community looks like. Therefore, I go as a council, we might want to be advised of that. So it's how do we keep the PICO dollars in the community and not get them taken, cost expenditure, and then we're out?
It's called home rule.
Yeah.
Well, currently the state said we don't have home rule on that one.
I know that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly, right, yeah, that's well said. Man.
Because
Well
the
said.
state is trying to take not only that money, but tourist development money, and use it for other purposes than it was legislated for, particularly the tourist development. And frankly, the tourist development is doing a lot more for our area and creating more wealth in our area than anything they're going to do with it. Including the beaches, the matching money comes from that tourist development, so that the local people don't have to pay it. A lot of local people complain that it keeps getting, but not a cent of it is local. It's federal and then matched by the local money from the tourist development. So there's a lot of things there, but it all comes down to home rule. Generally speaking, people usually think that the people closest to the people that are electing them do the best job. Somehow, when they get up into, and some of them were in cities, when they get up into the representative or state government, legislative government, they somehow lose that. Of course, some of them do it locally too, and I won't go into that. Yeah, there's the problem. You're absolutely right. And they take money away from something that people have wanted and want to keep and so forth, the local people, and they put it into something because they're controlling it. So it's not a good situation.
Well said, Mayor.
Okay. Whoops, you. No, I got you. I didn't skip you. Damn it, look, I went like this and I called your name.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Actually, I said you, but that's because I got that out faster.
Two things. One, in case you weren't aware, Park Avenue Church actually just got a new pastor, Steve Yook, I think. Yook, actually from Canada. Young pastor with a young family, and as you all know, Peter Lord started that church, and then Richard Lord took over, so Richard has officially retired. And so I visited there on Sunday, and actually was very, it made me excited, because I used to go there back in the day, and it looks like he has some pretty cool ideas for the community, and he wants to kind of get involved too. So if you want to reach out to him, I might invite him to come do the invocation.
That would be nice.
One council meeting. Second thing is, I know at our CRA meeting earlier, we discussed potentially having staff look at the code and seeing if there's a need to maybe amend the code a little bit to, I think Glenn was saying, grass height, boards on windows. So if council, I know I am interested in seeing potentially some advisability in regards to that. So those are my two things.
You can talk to the city manager about putting it on future agenda.
As long as we got, I think we all have consensus based on what I saw during the CRA to have advisability, have Glenn come back with some suggested adjustments to our current code enforcement.
That's great. Are you through, man? Okay. Number these. I don't want to hit my.
Yeah, let's try to cut down on the Christmas lights in July, but I don't think we can do anything about that. They call them 4th of July lights. I was just going to comment. I was just going to comment on the fact that at the very next meeting, I will join the ranks of my counterparts to my left, my two, and I will be retired the next time I get here.
Yeah.
So, at least temporarily, we'll see how that lasts. So, and now you're going to be, I was a swing vote on that. I've now gone to the retired side. 3-2.
All right.
Yeah, please do. Young bucks.
Anybody else? City manager.
Yes, sir. We have passed out the city manager's report that contains no action items or no information items. For some reason, it was inadvertently, the mayor's section was copied onto the city manager's, just published. It was just an error. I would like to remind council that budget hearings are coming up in August 15th at 5, followed by the first hearing September 4th at 5:30, and then the final budget hearing is on the 13th of September at 5:30. And as you're aware, you'll go into recess for no second meeting in June. We'll have the 4th of July, and we'll have a pretty hefty agenda for you on the first meeting in July.
I'll be retired. I can sleep in.
So,
No, you won't.
So on behalf of the staff, please enjoy your recess, and we'll
Thank
see
you.
you
Well,
after
thank you.
that.
Thank you,
And subject
absolutely.
to questions, that concludes my briefing.
Great. City attorney, you're not on there, but if you'd like to say anything, go right ahead. No? Okay. With that, I think we have done everything we were supposed to, and I thank you, ladies, and you gentlemen back there also, for being with us all evening. I'll declare this meeting adjourned.